you are to be remanded back to the capital of King's Landing, to be placed under the custody of the hand of the king, Lord Eddard Stark. Further, until the king deems fit to give Starpike to another, I shall appoint a Castellan in its interim. Fuck off. The Peaks have held Starpike for thousands of years, we'll hold them for thousands more. Titus Peak, tell me of your host. If you give me useful information, I will be sure to tell the king of your cooperation. He had kneeled down to meet the bounded man at eye level. Titus Peak spit in his face. Fuck you Sabaristan, and a pox on you. Calmly, Sabaristan wiped the fluid from his face before silently gesturing for the former Lord of Starpike to be removed from his presence. Lady Peak, now Margot Peak, was glaring at him as well as the bastard. But when Sabaristan turned, Almond Flowers had a look of anger on his face. Sabaristan, I was promised that I would be made the Peak in Starpike. This is an outrage. Calm yourself. He responded sternly. There was no such promise, just a slip of parchment. Now on my words to His Grace, I can make your legitimization all but guaranteed. But if you do not cease your words of anger, I will forget what you have done for us. The bastard glared at him, but wisely held his tongue. Sabaristan turned to the other lords and knights. Gentlemen, come, we have a great amount of work to do. Tyrion Lannister. It had been a number of moons since he had returned from the north. And in that time, it seemed his entire life was turned upside down on him. Jaime and Cersei arrested for treason, his father engaged in his own rebellion to free them, and chaos and civil war in the Reach. Curiously, he continued to hold his position of Master of Coin under Lord Stark, even after his siblings' and father's treason. He would not ask why though, he would not risk losing what little influence he already had. He believed that it was at least partially his role that spared his brother's life so far. Besides, perhaps it was cruel, but he truly did not care about his sister and his father. His sellsword Bronn, though he hadn't told him the specifics, let him know regardless that at some point, Jaime had confessed to being the father of Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. Truly, it had broken his heart. Joffrey was much like his sister, quite cruel and mad. But Myrcella and Tommen did not deserve to be punished for their parents' crime. But at the moment, he pushed those thoughts away. With Bronn at his back, he marched up the Tower of the Hand for a meeting of the small council. Entering the chambers, he took note of present company. At the head of the table sat the cold and dour Eddard Stark. To the right of Lord Stark, sat the unofficial second to the Lord Hand, the Master of Laws, Lord Stannis Baratheon. Across from Lord Stannis and to the left of Lord Stark sat the Master of Ships, Lord Jason Mallister. Moving to take his seat, Tyrion sat just to the left of Lord Mallister, Lord Stark giving him a respectful nod. He couldn't remember the last time he received one of those. Just across from him sat Varys, the mysterious bald man who seemed to know all, or at least pretend to. And yet, they were still down one seat. It seems we are in need of a new Grand Maester. Perhaps the new one would remember their particular vows. Lord Mallister let out an amused chuckle, while Stannis simply gritted his teeth, as he always does. Truly, 'tis a miracle he had not yet broken one. Yes, Pycelle's head looked positively confused. As if he didn't know why his head was on a spike. Varys muttered. After Pycelle was discovered to have reported news of the capital to his Lord Father, Lord Stark personally sentenced him and took his head. No matter. Lord Stark spoke. In a tone so icy, it reminded him of his father. A raven has been sent by an acolyte, under the supervision of Allard Seaworth, to the Citadel. They'll no doubt have a new Grand Maester chosen for us in some time. Lord Stark shuffled some parchments in front of him. But, on to more pressing issues. Lord Varys, your report. The eunuch bowed deeply. My Lord Hand, my little birds have whispered in my ears from all across the Reach. It seems that forces under Sir Stafford Lannister were sent south along the ocean road. At every mention of a Lannister, people would turn to look at him. They defeated the underprepared host of House Oakert just outside their castle. Lord Stark grimaced. I know of Sir Stafford. Though his son has skill, he leaves much to be desired. How did he defeat a house known for their martial abilities? According to my little birds, another force of the Reach, under House Stackhouse, joined the battle at some point. The men of Old Oak believed them to be a relief force, only for them to join the Westermen and slaughter them. And how so, Kurt? They've been put under siege, though they have not the host anymore to offer any true resistance. Lady Aowen is still ruling the castle, but her second son, Sir Eamon, perished and her eldest and heir, Sir Alyn, was put in a deep sleep. Stannis turned to the hand of the king. Word must be sent to my brother, as well as Sir Aris, about his family. Aye, that it must. Any more news? Yes, unfortunately. It seems a number of houses of the Reach have plotted to join in Lord Tywin's treason. Which ones? House Stackhouse, of course, House Dunn of Whitegrove, House Bridges of Dunstanbury, and House Peake of Starpike, though not officially as much as the other ones. However. Yes. Varys turned to Stannis. It seems that the Master of Law's former wife's family is the ringleader of the rebellion in the Reach. Stannis ground his jaw even harder than it seemed. In lighter news, however, it seems that your sons are leading an exemplary campaign against Lord Tywin, my Lord Hand. Only some days ago, your heir, Robb, won Harrenhal from a force of Westermen led by Lord Andros Brax. He turned to Lord Mallister. Your own son, Sir Patrek, seems to have conducted himself valiantly, my lord. He is currently under command of Lord Karstark, though his host has been recalled from their positions. Good. Keep me updated on any news. Varys bowed deeply again. Of course, my Lord Hand. Lord Mallister, report. Lord Stark, the royal fleet has finished their repairs and filled their stores. At your word, they can be sent anywhere you wish. We should send it so the Reach, at least a squadron to relieve Old Oak from its siege. I believe the castle faces the sea. Stannis argued. Certainly we need a presence in the Sunset Sea, but I am wary of sending the entire royal fleet across the other side of Westeros without a reserve. Stark turned to Mallister. Find a capable captain and send for him. I'll grant him the title of Admiral of the West and place a sizable portion of the fleet under his command. You'll remain here with the rest, in case we require ships. My Lord Hand. Lord Mallister bowed. Stark then turned his powerful gaze on him. For a moment, it felt he was on trial. Stannis glared at him, no doubt believing he too should be arrested. Mallister simply gazed at him expectantly. Varys gave him a kind smirk. Fear not, Lord Hand. The realm's finances are in capable hands. My office have finalized our investigations into Littlefinger's businesses. The realm is still in heavy debt, but without any major expenditures besides the current war. Rebellion. Stannis sternly cut in. Of course. Apologies. Besides the current rebellion, we are seeing a small growth in coin. Good. I want every last coin that is not being put into use, to be put into repaying the debts of the Iron Throne. I shall see it done, Lord Stark. Lord Baratheon, have you looked into what I asked? Stark questioned. My lord, I must once more argue against this. My brother ordered you to execute them for their treason. I will not have children executed. And if they can fulfill a purpose, I shall not yet execute the former queen or the Kingslayer. Tyrion cringed at the moniker. He always loved his brother and did not enjoy other names for him. Such as. Stannis challenged. For one, the Watch is always looking for skilled fighters. Tyrion had to chuckle at that. Is something amusing, Lord Tyrion? Stark grumbled. You'll have an easier time trying to make me grow, than making my brother go to the wall. Better the wall, than no head. Stark countered. Tyrion stayed silent at that. As for the children, Tommen, according to all witnesses and household, sees him as very inquisitive. He would make a good maester, which would conveniently resolve any potential attempts at seeing him upon the throne. I am also greatly fond of my niece. Tyrion interjected. Myrcella could be sent to the Silent Sisters or could simply be granted the Lannister name as well. I would prefer both Myrcella and Tommen to be granted the name, they have suffered enough. Stannis grunted at that. Not an understanding grunt, but a disagreeing one. Tyrion had become something of an expert at reading the different grunt of Stannis Baratheon. As for Joffrey, he could also join the Watch, perhaps he would elect self-exile in Essos, though he has his own great madness to him. And the whore. Stannis grumbled. Stark looked off-put by the label but continued, nonetheless. Cersei could be allowed to join the Silent Sisters, or even become a Septa. Tyrion disagreed. My Lord Hand, forgive me, but I must disagree with you on your assessment. Why is that? My sister is a woman who knows how to get what she wants. I fear until she is in the Seven Hells, neither I, nor you, nor the king, will ever be truly safe. You argue for your own sister's execution. I do. This is the South, not the comfort of the North, Lord Stark. My sister has personally attempted to end my life at least twice. I do not doubt she will try again if given the chance. Neither is she godly. The Septars or sister will do nothing to stop her from reaching up again. Stark was silent before he nodded. Very well. But, until we can use them to convince your father to surrender, they shall remain alive, and under guard. Your father will not accept less. Fuck, that was true. Stannis, I am aware of Robert's orders, but I am still the hand of the king, and in command in his absence. I shall inquire only once more. Find me options for the children and Jaime Lannister. I shan't ask again. He turned to the rest of the council after staring at Stannis. Anything else to report? Tyrion was impressed how Eddard Stark had verbally thrashed Stannis Baratheon, infamous for his lack of emotion. With silence or head shaking, Stark let out a sigh. Very well. You all dismissed and have your orders. Tyrion stood and left the chambers, running into Varys at the same time. Ah. Varys, you seem well. Lord Tyrion, I must say the same. Admittedly, it is good to have a capable master of coin once more. From what I understand, you quite enjoyed your verbal spars with the former Lord of the Fingers. Oh, they were amusing, no mistake, but he was always dangerous. Truly, had it not been for Lord Stark's ruthless justice, I may just have had to poison him at some point. Tyrion gave a face of mock shock. But Lord Varys. To murder a member of the small council is treason. Varys kept his face neutral, but his eyes gave away his amusement. Have no fear, my lord, I would guarantee that no one would find it was me. I never thought you had it in you to kill my lord. Varys loosened his expressions. Oh, I find it so boring. After all, why kill when you can eternally humiliate? Regardless, all I do is in service to the realm. Baelish would have been a disaster for the people. And how are those people? Oh, the city grumbled for some moons, but now that the Lord Hand's sons have relieved Harrenhal, the city should once more see a great influx of foodstuffs. I assume your little birds informed you of that. But of course, my lord. The pair, with Bronn behind them, ended up in one of the side halls, a part of the Great Hall. Tyrion elected to change the subject. You seem like a practical man. Oh, I would like to think myself as a practical man, my lord. It's a shame that practical men cannot have honest conversation. Truly a shame. Tell me, Varys, what do you think of the new hand of the king? Varys looked away, through one of the viewports in the walls, out to the sea. He is able. I would have thought that he would have been eaten alive by lions here in the city. And yet. It appears the wolf is not so foolish as previously thought. I admit that living in Westeros for so long, some prejudices have rubbed off on me. Eddard Stark has pleasantly surprised me. And why is that? Because he is the only person I have seen, including Jon Arryn, to talk down his grace from one of his murderous moods. And you find that admirable. Tyrion did not have solid proof, but perhaps he was the only one to suspect that Varys harbored allegiances to the former dynasty. Oh, Robert Baratheon was the warrior come again. But a warrior and a ruler are two very different things. You see, Robert Baratheon will only ever see reality if it was in front of him. If I told him 2 ravens were sitting at one of the gates into the city, he still would not believe. Yet, if there were 2 ravens sitting before him, he'd ask why I had not warned him of them. You see, the people of Westeros are obsessed with power. The small folk wish for the power of nobles, the nobles wish for the power of the king. Yet, Lord Stark has not shown such behavior. You have lived here for some time now, Varys, surely he is not the only one you've met that seeks his duty, above anything else in the world. You are correct, my lord. And who may this person be? I would rather not say. Varys grinned. Tyrion elected to ignore it, and grin back at him. Very well, keep your secrets. Varys bowed. As always, a riveting discussion, my lord. But, if you'll excuse me, the birds sing, and no one is there to listen. Without waiting for a response, the bald spymaster turned and continued down the hall. Tyrion felt himself shudder. He had a feeling that Varys was perhaps the most dangerous person he had ever met. As if one would be more scared from a giant beast, while ignoring the venomous spider crawling on their hand. Despite his best wish, Tyrion's responsibilities numbered more than just reporting to the small council. He had already met with the 4 keepers of the keys under his own office. When he was invested in his position, he learned that many of the offices under the Master of Coin were all Baelish's men. He used his authority to rectify such issues. But now, he was to meet with the King's Counter, the officer charged with all matter relating to specifically taxation and the collection of such. Now, normally he'd only receive reports from such officers, but he had specifically been requested by the officer today. Carl Bywater was the nephew of Sir Jacelyn Bywater. He was also the heir to his house as well. He had been appointed by Tyrion as the King's Counter after removing the previous man. Carl was a lanky man, more comfortable behind parchment than a shield. But he had a head for numbers. And Tyrion hoped that if he was anything like his uncle, he'd have the honor to not rob the realm blind. Entering the offices of the counter, he made his way to the man's desk. "Lord Carl. You sent for me." Bronn was already reaching for a goblet of wine. "Lord Tyrion, many thanks for your presence." "Of course, what is it you require?" "Yes, about that. You are aware that the King's Counter is also the Lord Judge of the Court of Gold. Though it was not as fancy or alluring as the courts of justice dispensed by the King or the Lord Hand, the realm was also in need of a court for financial matters. Under Daeron II Targaryen, such courts, dubbed the Courts of Coin, were implemented. 3 courts made up the Courts of Coin: Court of Gold, which handled all matters regarding financial matters with regards to nobles, the Court of Silver, which handled matters relating to merchants and craftsmen, and the Court of Copper, handling matters of the small folk. The King's Counter was dual-hatted as the Lord Judge of the Court of Gold, apparently. Admittedly, I was unaware of this, my lord. Regardless, please, continue. What is you need advice with? My lord, recently a petition was sent to be heard by the court. Lord Belyden Chittering accused Lord Montfort Valerian of misusing gold that had been given with stipulations. Tyrion's face must have given off his confusion, as Carl smirked kindly. A confusing thing. Apparently Lord Chittering had lent a loan to Lord Valerian of 2,000 gold dragons, with the stipulation that at least a fourth of it needed to be put to repairing some of the yards of Driftmark. It appears that Lord Chittering was tired of merchants complaining of broken piers and unsafe yards. Tyrion let out a sigh and hung his head in his hand. He offered another sigh, deeper this time, before looking up. Was a contract signed? Lord Chittering insists one was drawn up. Lord Valerian denies such a contract exists. He heard Bronn behind him chuckle. Tyrion gave Carl Bywater a look of utter contempt. "Fuck me." And Bronn threw his head back and clutched his stomach from full-blown laughter. The realm is more than small council meetings, and much of it was bloody exhausting. Bronn. The sellsword, still chuckling, turned. "Fetch the wine. We'll be here a while." Notes. Apologies for the long update. I had already completed this chapter as well as the next one some weeks ago. I guess I just completely lost track of time. My bad. In addition, I felt good when I wrote this particular chapter, but after going back to it, I realized how I've steadily veered from the original goal of this story. Regardless, I see this story finishing up within 10 or so chapters from now. Fear not. You'll notice that I have added this to a series. I already have ideas for at least one sequel story to this one. I digress. Chapter 42, The Battle of Horn Hill. Notes. Again, the second POV in this chapter was amongst my favorite parts to write in this story so far. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 300 AC. Sir Barristan Selmy. They had left Starpike less than a sennight ago. As per his orders, his host marched directly west, for Horn Hill. Sabaristan hoped that Randil Tali was not so foolish as Titus Peak. For if he was, unlike Titus Peak, Sabaristan knew that Randil Tali could be a true difficulty. Unlike the strong-willed but incompetent Titus Peak, Randil Tali was a man of war. He had beaten Robert's force, even though he had been outnumbered greatly. So Sabaristan could not even say he had numbers on his side. But only this morning, has his host crossed the border into Tali territory. It was sundown now. They could reach Horn Hill on the morrow. For now, he ordered the host to make camp. They had not needed a council of war as he along with the other commanders had discussed while on the march. So instead, he found himself around the large fire at the center of the camp. With him were of course Lords Selmy and Caron, along with Sir Roland, Sir Lawrence, and some other minor commanders. His distant nephew was in conversation with his heir, so Sabaristan had not wanted to interfere with any possible lessons being taught. So instead, he turned to the other major lord accompanying him. Lord Caron. Lord Commander. Apologies if this brings bad memories, but this war has already seen the decline of many a storied houses. So much so that I am curious. You are the only person to hold the name of Caron. Have you plans of forwarding your name? Lord Caron blinked at him. He took a moment to think on it. Truly, I do think of it. However, I have already written in my will that should I die without any heirs born of mine own seed, that I request that Roland here, be legitimized and carry on the name. The Lord of Nightsong patted the shoulder of his base-born brother. I see. That being said, you two are both at war. Do you have any contingencies? Unfortunately, no. Unlike the situation regarding the Lady Brian, my father nor his father before him had any long-distant family that sired potential heirs. I am the only person to hold the Caron name, but Roland is the only other person to carry the blood. This is most unfortunate. If you wish, I can speak to His Grace about organizing a betrothal for you. I thank you for your consideration, Sabaristan. However, for the time being, I plan on marrying after this fiasco. However, he looked over to his brother. Should I pass on this campaign, I request that you immediately recall Roland from any fighting. He should be safe. Sir Roland looked to argue, but before he could, Sabaristan responded. Consider it done. At that point, his distant family seemed to have concluded their little talk. Sir Lawrence, I must ask, 'tis only my duty as your elder. Sir Lawrence seemed to widen his eyes at the sudden attention. Has any lady caught your eye? To the small folk he was the Honourable Kingsguard, but he still enjoyed the campfire talk of men. It reminded him of better days. The young man blushed deeply, much to the amusement of the surrounding men. Well, Lady Marissa caught my eye, he reddened. Lady Marissa? I don't not recall the name. Lady Marissa is the eldest of Lord Ewan Caffin. I visited Thornton with father many moons ago. I think she looked beautiful. Well, I am sure after this debacle is cleared up, Lord Caffin would be honored to have you as a goodson. I hope so as well. He is a genial fellow. Though what? I got the impression that he still harbored feelings of anger over the death of his father, Lord John Caffin, during the rebellion. I see. Regardless, I am sure that he would be open to such a match. After all, you both come from Marcher Lords, and you both share borders. One can only hope. And so, that is how the evening progressed. Talk of family, of stories, of laughter and of sadness, and much more. It had been an hour or so after the sun had fallen, and the moon had arose, that they decided to call it a night. They had a big day ahead of them tomorrow. The host had just arrived before a large ridge. On the other side was the castle of Horn Hill. But at the moment, Sabaristan was speaking to an outrider that had ridden back some time ago. Are you sure you didn't see any host? The outrider had reported that the field in front of Horn Hill looked like it had just seen battle. Bodies all over the place, fires, arrows, and more. Sabaristan. Very well. He waved him off. Snapping his reins, Sabaristan urged his mount on. The lords and mounted soldiers galloped after him. Reaching the top of the hill, he saw first-hand of what the soldier spoke of. Weapons and armor and bodies strewn about the land. Moans from dying men, fires and tents. What in the seven hells happened here? Sir Roland wondered aloud. Sir Barristan scanned the field. It appeared to be mostly made of one party, meaning that they lost or were caught by surprise. There! Sir Lawrence exclaimed, his finger pointing to banners that were broken on the field. Good eyes, lad. I see the 3 castles of House Peak, I see 3 thunderbolts of House Ligood, and I see the blue field of House Wold. Lord Caron reported. Well, it seems we found the missing host from Starpike. Sir Roland japed. Yes, but what happened? Sir. Riders incoming. Sir Lawrence pointed to a group of horsemen galloping straight for them. Ready men. We know not their intentions yet. Lord Selmy ordered. Sir Barristan could hear the ring of swords leaving their scabbards. When they were close enough, the lead rider called out. Is that the cloak of a Kingsguard? Aye, and who do you speak for? Good sir. I am an outrider for Lord Tarley, meant to keep any more hosts from sneaking up upon the castle. Stand down. Take me to Lord Tarley now. The outriders nodded before turning and snapping their reins. Many of the mounted soldiers stayed behind, but about 2 score kept riding with them. It took a few minutes, but he knew it, their party was past the gates of Hornhill, and were circling the main yard of the castle. A bald man, with a beard, and a massive great sword strapped to his back approached. Sir Barristan Selmy. Lord Tarley, a pleasure as always. What happened here? Why does it look like a battle took place? Because there was one Lord Commander. About a se'night ago, a guard from a small village rode here warning of a host coming. 2 days later, a host of several thousand came over the hill that you yourself came from. We saw the banners while riding here. Titus Peake, who has been attainted from his seat, and his 2 vassals. Why would they march on you? Many fortnights ago, many houses in the Reach received ravens from Tywin Lannister, promising gold and the rule of Highgarden in support of overthrowing the Tyrells. I assume you refused the offer. A tempting one, especially for the greedy lords of the Reach, but I trust Tywin Lannister as much as I trust a snake not to bite me. It appears his allies did not take kindly to my refusal. Well, it certainly speaks to your character, to stand by your liege lord. That fat oaf. I didn't do it for him. He is useless, much like he has been for decades. I did this for mine own house, and for the future of House Tyrell. Willers Tyrell will be a good lord. I see. In the meantime, do you have any news about the state of the realm? We have been at march for fortnights. Aye, perhaps you have heard, but a host of many thousands of Westermen marched down the ocean road. They took Old Oak by surprise. Houses Stackhouse, Dun, Bridges, Wold, Ligood, Peak, and Florent have all openly revolted. Sir Barristan was surprised at the amount of rebel lords. And they offered a significant opposition too. Those houses together could offer close to 20,000 men, not mentioning the host of Westermen. Is that all? Nay. It appears Robb Stark and his brother, Edwyle Stark, have tied up Tywin's campaign in the Riverlands. Robb Stark took Harrenhal back from the Westermen, and Edwyle Stark has been able to hit the Old Lion's supply trains for moons. This is desperation. Tywin directed these houses to rebel just to tie up his grace's men. Lord Tarley nodded. I agree, sir. This reeks of backhand desperation and politicking. Very well. Regardless, I have my orders, Lord Tarley. If you would be so kind to have rooms prepared for me and my council. Additionally, we shall need your men when we set off in some day to march north to Highgarden. I will see it done, Lord Commander. I shall lead the men of my land. My son and heir, Daikon, shall remain here to rule in my stead. I understand, forgive me my lord, but I thought you had another son, and older son. I did. It seemed he did not wish to go further into details. As his party began to dismount in earnest, he and Lord Tarley walked further into the castle. Though we had forewarning, we could still not raise our entire host. On my word, my son, Daikon fled Hornhill to ride for all our domain west of here, to raise a secondary host. This host was led by the nephew of Lord Silas Hunt, Sir Hyle Hunt. When we were put under siege, they were able to attack them from the rear, as I sent the host we had through the gates to attack them from the front. We crushed them together. Any notable hostages? I. Sir Amory Wold, Sir Felwood Liggood, and Sir Darren Liggood all rot in my dungeons at the moment. Sir Wilbert Wold died on the field of battle. I see much of their host has been destroyed. I ensured it. Worry not, sir, I'll have 4,000 men ready to march with you. Give me a sennight. Only a sennight. The battle only ended 2 days ago. Much of the host has already been raised. Very well. Come the sennight, we march however. Of course. Oh, I nearly forgot. Word reached us here in Hornhill, His Grace has already taken Ashford, and the last word we received was that his host was marching on Cider Hall. Good to hear, many thank my lord. The Lord of Hornhill nodded before leaving to finish his work. Sir Barristan let out a sigh of relief. Come a couple of days, and he'd have a force over 15,000 strong behind him. Not an insignificant amount. He could only hope it was enough. Brienne of Tarth. She had reached a position that no woman ever had. She was the first woman to ever be a member of the fabled Kingsguard. It was a life that possessed a dichotomy. On one hand, she expected the mass of ridicule and jeering from those lesser men. Yet on the other, she received unexpected knowledge of the Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. Sir Preston Greenfield insulted her every chance he got. Until even the king grew tired of the talk and ordered them to spar. Sir Preston had not since spoke to her since she sent him falling over his own arse. Sir Orisokert was respectful and less rude, though she would oft note how he would look at her oddly, as if still trying to understand her. Sir Guyard Morrigan seemed to not even notice that she wasn't a man. A cheery man, Sir Guyard was always known for his song and fair attitude. He had actually flirted with her at one point. She had denied him with a blush but grew surprised when she saw him flirt with literally every single woman in the immediate vicinity. He seemed to know his vows, but it was a game to him. She had yet to meet Sir Mandon Moore, still in the capital. Sir Barristan was a great Lord Commander, for the 2 days she had been around him. But 'twas the king who surprised her the most. As the Kingsguard, she and her sworn brothers were those closest to the king, ergo the need to swear to keep silent about matters they hear. It was not until her first night-time shift that she heard. No horse had joined their host yet at the moment, and the king had stumbled back into the tent from yet another minor feast in some tent or another. As she heard the great beast of a man breathe heavily, no doubt trying to fall asleep, she swore she heard him whisper a name just as he fell asleep. She couldn't be sure of course, but she heard him whisper Lionel. No doubt there were those whose would remark about great hypocrisy, a king laying with whores when still thinking of a long-lost love. But she was not such a person. She did not remark. She was a Kingsguard, and a Kingsguard kept their vows. The more the host marched, the more it took form. Camp followers grew, traveling merchants made coin, and green boys became men. Their first engagement was at Ashford Meadows before the castle of Ashford. The king had grumbled the day before. She knew from stories of her father that Robert Baratheon's only defeat in the rebellion was at Ashford. The Battle of Ashford Meadows was much different from the one many decades prior. The royal force caught the middling amount of Reachmen by surprise. Of the seemingly 6,000 men roughly, about half were killed before they made a hasty retreat. The traitor leaders, Lord Reynard Dunn of Whitegrove, his son and heir Sir Ossifer Dunn, Sir Rayford Stackhouse, second son of Lord Gerald Stackhouse, and Sir Owen Florent. The names were confusing as they all came from families all over the Reach. It appeared that the host they faced was actually only a small band, raised by the second sons and more minor lords that rebelled. Unfortunately, they were not able to capture or slay any of the leaders. Their own force faced a number of casualties. The king's younger brother, Lord Renly Baratheon, had taken an arrow in the shoulder while sitting atop his mount. After examination, it appeared to be naught but a minor wound, but it still sent the lord off his horse from the force. The cousin and heir of Lord Ralph Buckler, Sir Brus Buckler, also received a minor injury. He had taken a blade slash right above the eye. Due to the amount of veins, there was quite amount of blood. Fortunately, it was more an appearance than anything, he'd be right within a couple of days. The more serious injury had been her sworn brother, Sir Preston Greenfield. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, the knight had gotten between a rebel and the king just in time to take the swing of his axe. He was still in the healer's tent, a large wound in his side. The knight that had done it had his skull crushed by the king's hammer. They faced one sad death, however. The head of House Penrose, Lord Edmund Penrose, had volunteered to lead the van at the start of the battle. His brother, Sir Courtenay, was serving as the Castellan of Storm's End, and the king readily granted the request. But like the fortunes of war are fickle, so too are lives. The Lord of Parchments fell in a death of blades, overrun before the main force could reach the lines from charging. Both the king and the Lord of Storm's End had been greatly saddened at his death. Though a relatively minor lord, the current House of Penrose had very close relationships with the Baratheons. Of their force of 20,000 men, they lost less than 1,000. The host had reached Cider Hall some days later. Not wishing to become traitors, House Fossoway of Cider Hall quickly bent to the king. Additionally, Lord Bolon Fossoway lent his entire family along with their host to the king's. The king had Sir Aris take the second son, Tanton, as a squire. The fourth son, Edward, had unusually strapped himself to her own hip, following her around everywhere. The first and third sons, Bordric and Brian, were formerly leading their house's host, though due to their age, true command was with their uncle, Sir Samwell Fossoway. His bastard son Franklin was in exile in Essos. Brian was a warrior, no doubt. But her martial abilities laid in combat, much more than larger strategy. She wouldn't deny it, better to know yourself as best as others believe they know you. But to her, she felt that this entire debacle, this war, it had to be close to finishing. Yes, the Reach was large and wealthy, yet the true power behind the rebels was Tywin Lannister, and yet the scions of House Stark seemed to be slowly winning against him. Once, if Tywin Lannister was defeated, it was only a matter of time until the Reach calmed. Or so she had thought. Brian. She had to shake herself to attention. So long had she been on guard duty led her to almost forget about the sounds of voices. Yet her liege, Robert the First Baratheon, had called her. Turning, she entered the room. As she entered, she observed the king sitting on the edge of the bed. Bloated as the man was, he was thinner than he had been when she first met him. His beard, still wiry and wild, was trimmed. Not in length, but in formation, the sides were shortened just a tad. Just so he wouldn't look like some barbarian. But there was a look in his eyes, one that was a cross between sadness and acceptance. Your Grace. He roughly gestured to a chair beside the bed. Sit. Your Grace. Sit. Not shouting but raising his voice. Adjusting her scabbard so as to sit more comfortably, Brian sat in the chair. Only a small distance from the king. Here. Drink. He handed her a large mug of what looked like ale. Your Grace, I mustn't. I need to be on alert to guard you. Would you? Your Grace. She looked at him alarmed. His eyes were now alert, but also filled with self-pity, unusual to see in a man like Robert Baratheon. Would you protect me? Over half of my original Kingsguard knowingly committed treason against me. I've no doubt that if that lion bitch told them to, they'd kill me in my sleep. I am not Meryn Trant. I am not Jaime Lannister. I am the daughter of Lord Selwyn Tarth. I hold to my oaths. The king was silent as he gazed at her with a hard stare. After a few moments, she worried that she'd overstepped her words, until King Robert visibly relaxed and let out a chuckle. Well, fuck me with a broom, lass. If you'd been born with a cock, I'd EVE called you Ned Stark, you two, and your fucking honor. Your Grace. She was unsure how to respond to such a statement. But she felt it best to simply let the king talk. Oh Ned. You ever meet the man? He looked at her curiously. No. I've not had the pleasure to meet Lord Stark. You would like him, he'd sure as hell like you. You know the story of us. Yes, Your Grace. You two were raised as wards under Lord Arryn in the Eyrie, from my understanding. You have the truth of it. But Ned was always the best between us. He always paid attention to lessons more than me. Always paid more attention to the Master at Arms than I. Always was more honorable than the fucking Seven themselves. He grumbled out. Brian was sure that the king was still slightly drunk. He was looser than she'd seen him before. I'm sure that Your Grace was just as good a young man. Brian responded neutrally. But it was obvious quickly, that it was the wrong thing to say. The king snapped to her faster than she thought possible. "Not you," he growled. "Not you too. I've been surrounded by snakes and liars for 20 damned years. I'll not have you begin lying to me as well. Apologies, Your Grace." She heard him moan. "Oh, drop the Your Grace shite. It is grating on the ears. It would be inappropriate, Your Grace. Oh, fuck you. Just like that goddamned idiot Ned." Brian spoke before she realized she opened her mouth. "You speak of your friend like that?" As soon as she realized what she had said, she snapped shut, and her eyes went wide as she stared at the king, who in turn stared at her too. "Apologies, Your Grace. I never meant to." "Stop, lassie. 'Tis the first time someone's spoken to me like that as they should. Still, apologies. Have them. Ned was always better than I." "Once," the king stopped for a moment, deep in thought. "Once, I had stumbled into the kitchens of the Uri. It was late morning and my head hurt like a bitch. As I grabbed a loaf of bread from a cupboard, I overheard 2 servants speak. They said, 'Have you seen Eddard Stark, the one from the north? He is so plain, isn't he? Much worse on the eyes than that Robert fellow.'" He let out a sigh. "In that moment, I felt so much rage against them, I almost threw them out of the moon door myself." "What happened?" "I almost did, but then I thought of what Ned would do." "What would the Lord Stark do?" "Ned." It wasn't until that moment that I realized what Ned went through, being the second son. Women may think him plain, but to me, he is the best man in the world. They fell into a silence once more until the king began again. "I didn't want it, did you know?" "Your Grace." "Didn't want what?" "That chair. That damnable iron chair covered in the filth of dragons. Truly. I just wanted Lyanna back. My dear, dear Lyanna. When King's Landing was taken, everyone turned to me. It was all so much at the time. Ned had already ridden south to look for Lyanna. Jon Arryn, damn the man, had me take the crown and my life was no longer my own. But Ned. By the gods, he would have made a better king. Definitely. He would never want it, but for different reasons than I. I always thought the job boring, but Ned, he never wanted it because of the expectations. And a man who doesn't wish for that power because they fear they'll fail, is the exact right person for the job. I see, Your Grace." At this point, she was just trying to tire the man out, to let him fall asleep. "You know, I hear what they say behind my back. I hear the whispers that Lyanna ran away with Rhaegar. I hear them say that Lyanna thought that I didn't truly love her." He said ever so mournfully. I've heard such things myself." I'm sure you have. But answer me this." He leaned so far forward she feared he'd fall out of the bed. "In this sick fucking world of ours, is it better to love the idea of a person, than nothing at all? I loved Lyanna, but perhaps to some, not in the right way, but I would have tried. Gods know we only knew each other for so long. We had so long to learn to love. I would have given her everything. I would have. His voice fell off weakly. Brian was shocked. She had heard that Robert Baratheon was a drunken oaf. But perhaps there was a side to him that only very few had seen. But as she paid more attention, she realized that the king's eyes were beginning to droop. No doubt the signs of imminent sleep. Lyanna. She saw him reach his hand up as he fell over on the mattress, in the same, soft voice, that she'd heard previously. She stood to make way for the entrance of the room. She turned just before she stepped out. "Sleep well, Your Grace." She knew that he never heard her. But gods had her mind been reeling from the conversation. Notes. Keep updated. The next few chapters are going to be a tad shorter, and more connected, better to be read all together instead of one chapter one week, and another the next. This particular story will end in about 10 chapters, most likely less. But, I already have a direct sequel planned and a rough story formed already. Chapter 43, The Calm Before the Storm. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 300 AC. Robb Stark. This was it. After months of war, this was it. In the past moon, much news had reached the Crown's army in the Riverlands. King Robert had taken control of the eastern portion of the Reach, from the Crown lands to west of Cider Hall. The Lord Commander, Sir Barristan Selmy, had taken a separate host and now controlled most of the southern Reach. Many houses remained neutral in the Reach's conflict, more interested in seeing how the Crown and House Tyrell would respond. House Hightower most especially remained neutral. The Crown's forces had met a small skirmish at Whitehair Grove. Although a royal victory, the commander of the Royal Van, Lord Ralph Buckler, died, leaving the storied house in the hands of his cousin, Bruz, as the new Lord of Bronze Eggett. The last word they received mentioned that the divided hosts of Sir Barristan and the king finally regrouped just south of Highgarden, additionally meeting up with a Tyrell host led by Sir Garland Tyrell. But now, the time had come for his challenge. Over the time that the northern campaign took place, many of the lords and knights had, through loyalty to his father, or through his own skill, listened to him, including many of the river lords, and he held influence over the Vale lords. It wasn't until he met up with Edwyle that he realized what had happened. "You are their leader, Rob, they are looking to you for everything." He had tried to deny it, but already, at only 7 and 10, he realized he had led an army numbering over 25,000 strong, had taken castles and had battled fierce opponents. It was almost too much for him to handle. But this is where he found himself, inside a command tent, just west of Stonehenge. All the lords of the Riverlands, the North, and the Vale before him. All were shouting, trying to get their own opinions in. Word had reached them that Tywin Lannister had left the safety of the walls of Riverrun. In all honesty, he would too. The old lion had mostly his cavalry, he'd need open space. He was nervous. He had won every battle he was in, but for some reason, going directly against Tywin Lannister felt too much. The other side of his head told him how ridiculous he was being. Of course he could win against him. But reputation was one hell of a thing. And he discerned that it was not fear for himself over a potential defeat, it was fear for his family. He knew how Tywin Lannister dealt with his enemies. If he failed, and Daisy, Samzin, Edwyle, or anyone else was hurt because of it, he didn't know if he could handle it. But all these thoughts were drowned out by the noise in the tent. So much so, that his own thoughts were beginning to drown out. Finally, having enough, he raised his hand. Without a word being spoken, the tent began to quiet down. Slowly standing up, he out his hands on the table, and examined the map before them. It was a large map, specifically of the Riverlands, with all the natural terrain added. He could feel their eyes on him, as they looked to him, waiting for him to speak, but speak he did not. He had a battle to plan. "Lord Bracken, how large are the hills just east of Riverrun?" He'd occasionally ask these questions, getting a more detailed description than just the map could give him. He would ask the lords about the density of some woods, or the texture of the soil, hard or soft. Every time he'd post a query, the gathered commanders would expect him to open up soon. But he stayed quiet. He learned this from his father: silence was just as effective as the loudest shout. And slowly, ever so slowly, a plan began to form. It was not risky, not at all in fact. Rather, it was the opposite. If his idea succeeded, he could end the war in a single battle. If he failed, he still wouldn't truly lose, but it would not be decisive. Quite out of character for him. Looking up, he immediately looked into the eyes of Ed. For the first time since the commanders entered the tent, he spoke. But not to them, directly to his brother. "You remember the hammering of the Riverlands? With Sir Roderick?" Every other person gazed at them in confusion, but Ed simply grinned back. He knew where his thoughts were. Standing up to his full height, he addressed the rest of the tent. "My lords, this is what we'll do. Tywin Lannister must go on the offensive, with his decreasing food train thanks to my brother and Lord Umber and Lady Mormont, as well as the makeup of the remnants of his troops. He has no other choice. He must use his cavalry, and he must attack soon. Let's gut the bastard then." The Great Jon roared aloud, to the agreement of the mountain clans and many of the southwestern Northmen, specifically those of House Dustin and House Ryswell. "No, we shall meet him on our terms, not theirs." Here he used his finger to point to a small area of woods just west of Stonehenge, and just east of their current position. "Is an area of woods. No so dense so as to hinder footmen, but too much for mounted troops. Grabbing a wooden sigil, he placed it on the map, due west of their current camp, just east of River Run. We'll place every single archer we have on every single horse we have, and they shall meet the Lannisters initially, alone. Are you mad? He heard many roar against him. None more than Lord Mouton. He could understand, the man had lost one of his sons during the siege of Harrenhal. Lord Rob, I must protest, archers are effective, yes, but alone, against charging horse. They'll be cut to pieces. Sir Stephen Free spoke. He stood silent as more and more resisted his idea, until it settled down again. Worry not. They shall meet them on the lowest part of the field. They shall draw in the overly prideful lions. Then, when the lions would nearly be upon them, our entire force of footmen shall march out from the woods and over this small hill. The lions will not know what hit them. And so, he explained his plan in greater detail. Over time, each lord and knight was won over, finally realizing the complexity of his plan. And as our foot take the field, the archers shall use their horses to retreat behind our lines, reform, and send more volleys of arrow out. Lord Rob, an excellent plan, but I am still worried over one point. The Great Jon was uncharacteristically cautious. Yes, Lord Umber. The foot, our footmen are as fierce as they come, but in this, the Lannisters will still be charging at full speed. 'Tis not an easy thing for a footman to march under formation while a wall of armored horse comes barreling towards them. Worry not. I have a feeling you'll enjoy this Great Jon. The giant of a man perked at that. My lords, the footmen of the north shall take the van of the column, using the tune of Torrens Lake to embolden them. And all the Northmen grinned. Using instruments to rally troops was not new to warfare. But the Northmen, being Northmen, ever improved it. Not only did they use it to keep men in marching time, but they also used uplifting tunes to inspire courage in their men, and strike unease in the hearts of the enemy. And no instrument succeeded in this endeavor better than the time-tested bagpipe. A shrill sound, only a true Northman could find sweet poetry in the harsh sound. He knew the Great Jon would enjoy it as the Umbers were widely known in the north for their bagpipes. And for a peasant conscript, seeing the Great Jon marching with his great sword while drums and pipes were blasting, well damn, if that didn't inspire him, nothing would. Tywin Lannister. Just as he was sure that the young wolf was holding his own meeting, Tywin was meeting with his own men. Since the fall of Harrenhal, he had steadily recalled every Lannister soldier east of his position. Further, he had sent riders back to the Westerlands, calling for an additional emergency host to march at full speed for the Riverlands. What he had not counted on was the forethought of one of his lords, Daemon Marbrand, his cousin. The man was older than him or his siblings, but he was glad that he was as competent as Kevan at the very least. Unknown to him, Lord Marbrand had been raising a host from his lands as well as some other smaller, minor houses. All told, by the time the riders arrived in the Westerlands, a host of close to 8,000 had already been raised. Its downside was that it was mostly green boys and old men. They had to scrape the bottom of the barrel so to speak for troops. Regardless, instead of having to wait to raise an emergency host, already, many thousands of men marched to assist them already. But it was not his only problem. He had been having unpleasant dreams. He had never lost sleep over the choices he made in his life. They were his, and his alone. But recently, he dreamed of his sweet Joanna once more. Though in these dreams, she would belittle him, or for not paying attention. He knew not to what, as every time he reached for her in his mind, to embrace her just one last time, she would disappear. And the moments he were awake for, were not much better. Just the other day, he had ordered the public execution of a sergeant he had overheard speaking of the rumors from the capital. Word soon spread to not speak of his golden twins. Additionally, he had heard some captains talk of it, but truthfully, he could ill afford to execute experienced, veteran, men. The talk of his lords broke his thoughts and pulled him from his own mind. We have underestimated the Stark boys for far too long. You expect them to falter, they will not. His brother, Sir Kevan reprimanded some of the more stupid lords. But sir, surely they must be as worn out as us, if not more. Since they marched south, the northern force has been constantly on the move, at some point, their resolve will fail. Lord Lewis Leiden countered. Lord Leiden was not an idiot, he was a capable enough man, but his words were not wise at the moment, and did nothing to help stifle the idiotic comments from lords more moronic than he. We have over 20,000 men, over half of them are mounted. The fields of the Riverlands are ripe for running down those savages. Lord Damien Serret foolishly advised. He spoke for the first time since the meeting started. If all you have to offer are the words of a dolt, I would rather you not speak at all, my lord. He coldly told off Lord Serret. My Lord Kevan spoke to him. Even though he was his brother, especially in front of their bannermen, Kevan spoke to him with the utmost respect. We have the greatest force of horse between us two, but you are of course correct, we cannot rely on numbers in this. Instead, let us take a lesson from the Stark pups themselves. Let us lure them in, and pincer them in with 2 separate columns. That has the potential to work. He muttered quietly to himself, but without conviction. Now hold on. Spoke Kevan's good father, Sir Hayes Swyft stood. You speak that numbers will not work. Would you enlighten the rest of us? Before Kevan could answer, another of his bannermen, Lord Crickehall, turned to the dunce who spoke. Sit down, you dumb fuck. He growled angrily. Ever since the news of the loss of his second son, Roland Crickehall had grown distant and full of rage. Have you cotton in your eyes and ears? Before Sir Hayes could angrily retort, he finally waved his hand for silence. Calm yourselves. The reason that we cannot rely on numbers is because the Stark brothers no doubt are aware of our numbers as well. And as such, no doubt have a trap or plan already designed to either annihilate or negate this advantage. And I will not fall for the same thing that Sir Gregor fell for. Kevan spoke after him. Despite the best abilities of our spies, we have not been able to discern and usable information about their plans. However, we have learned other things. We are now aware that the rift that some of the Freys had with the Starks are now gone. Many of the Freys that had such a problem also fell at Harrenhal. Tywine noticed that Lord Crickehall's eyes darkened at the mention of the castle where his son fell. As such, we can no longer rely on a schism between the allied forces. Kevan finished speaking. He decided to pick up where he left off. We do have one piece of vital information. The lords leaned in to pay closer attention. One of our spies was able to read one of the ravens sent to Robb Stark. It seems the misdirection we've directed in the Reach is reaping wonders for us. Currently, the king, and the entire force of the Stormlands are marching through the Reach as we speak to re-establish royal order. Are they succeeding? It doesn't matter if they are or not. It never truly mattered. The whole purpose was to distract Robert Baratheon and buy us time. Time that we now have. According to the information we have gleaned, we have ample time for this battle. It is the one true advantage we hold over our enemies. We need not worry any reinforcements joining the battle at some point. The Crown Lands have been rallied to serve as the defenders of King's Landing and the Stormlords are busy. Theoretically, we have over a moon to deal with the Starks and their allies. The lords nodded happily at that. And they should. It was true what he had said, time was the one advantage they had. They need not worry about any surprise force. Unfortunately, this was offset by the need to act due to their food supplies. Though not needed to ration yet, they could only count on about another fortnight of supplies before they would need to worry and begin rationing. And rationing was never good with the fighting men. So, for all practicality, they would need to march against the Starks, Riverlords, and Vale Lords, in roughly a sennight, ideally. Eddard Stark. It had been a stressful number of moons since he had rode south and become the hand of the king to Robert. Initially, he had expected to become grey-haired over the governance of the realm, not knowing that later, he would effectively lead the realm through a disastrous civil war. Robert was king, aye, but he was in the field. Supreme civil authority rested on his shoulders. And by the gods was he tired. So very tired. But he was the quiet wolf. He was Eddard of House Stark. He would do his duty if it killed him. And it may very well do so. Sitting in the Tower of the Hand, Eddard was actually nervous for the following conversation he was about to have. Only because the possible end of future hostilities could result from it. He had called Tyrion Lannister for an audience. He barely had time to think further when the very same man was allowed entrance into the Hand Solar. "Ah! My Lord Hand, always a pleasure," Lord Tyrion remarked in his usual sarcastic wit. "You will be pleased to know that the matter involving Lords Chittering and Valerian has been resolved. Perhaps to the likes of neither, but resolved nonetheless. Never mind that now, we have something important to discuss. I'm the master of coin, resolving financial disputes is important. I like to think of myself as not much of a lackwit, but admittedly I came to the realization that only one person can guarantee the continuance of peace after this war is over. Yes, it is quite frustrating that my Lord Father has that quality. Make no mistake, Lord Stark, no one no. I speak not of Tywin Lannister." He interrupted simply. "Oh. You cannot mean his grace, can you? Surely even you know of his blood rage." "I speak not of Robert either." "Then please my Lord Hand, if you'll indulge me too. I speak of you, Tyrion Lannister." For the first time since he had met the small man, the little lion actually seemed surprised. "Pardon. I do not wish to see the destruction of the Westerlands. Many are innocent, including the thousands of small folk. Especially before the onset of the change of seasons, winter is coming after all. As you are quite fond of reminding us." He could tell he was trying to lighten the mood, but Eddard just blew right past it. "And the only way that can happen easily, is to have Tywin Lannister surrender. If he does not, we will be forced to chase him through the Westerlands, and it will cause great damage. And I do not doubt, that even if he were to surrender, Tywin is not the man to let go of past grudges, even if he did finally believe the truth." "Yes, you have the right of it so far. Which leads to you. Cersei will be out of the picture, and as for your brother, Sir Jaime will not be involved after the conclusion of this war." Tyrion looked up worried. "My Lord Hand, please, I must." "Calm yourself, Lord Tyrion. I have privately decided to offer him the choice of accepting the Black when the time comes for his sentencing. Though I must stress that it is his only chance at life. Make no mistake, Tyrion Lannister, Sir Jaime will either trade his white cloak for a black one or be sent back to Casterly Rock in a coffin." Tyrion understood the message well enough, he hoped. "If you wish for your brother's life, convince him to accept the Black. I digress. If we can have Tywin surrender, one of the stipulations that I have decided to implement is that he is to recognize you as his official heir. The Iron Throne will not recognize anyone else." He could tell that Tyrion was absolutely gobsmacked. "My Lord Hand, I thank you for this, but surely he will not accept this. My father has not hidden his distaste for me. If he wishes for House Lannister to continue to hold the Westerlands, he'll agree. I will not be moved on this matter. Which brings us back to you. I will be open to you and confess some things. I confess that I have been greatly surprised at the skill at which you have executed your office. No doubt you will make a fine lord someday. I have great hopes that after your father, you will lead the Westerlands just as ably, and with more compassion, but, before I do this, I must have your word." "My word?" "Your word. I am aware that your brother is one of only few members of your family that cares for you. Additionally, I am aware that he is perhaps your favorite person in the realm. But I must have your word that if he chooses not to take the Black, that you will not hold resentment against me or mine for what I will undoubtedly have to do then. As both a Lord Paramount and the Hand of the King, I have enormous amounts of power at my hands, but even that only goes so far. I can offer the Black to him, but only he can decide what he will do." He had never seen Tyrion Lannister so deep in thought. For a long time, there was silence between them before Tyrion finally looked at him again. "And you promise that should he take the Black, that you'll protect him from his grace's wrath?" "On my word as a Stark of Winterfell, if your brother takes the Black, I shall sooner face Robert's blade than allow him to run Sir Jaime down." Still, Tyrion was silent. Still thinking. Once more, he looked back at him. "Give me your word that Myrcella and Tommen will be granted the Lannister name, and given into my custody, and I accept this proposal." This time it was his turn to think on it. It could result in some problems. There would always be those that would try to raise them to the throne, perhaps even without their own knowledge, but that could be a matter for the future. "If you give me your word that they shall only marry within the Westerlands or marry not at all, I shall give this to you as well." He hoped this measure would stop any attempts at building potential alliances. Very well. I accept these conditions. Tyrion solemnly responded. Without a dismissal, the little lion left the chambers much quieter than he had entered. After the door shut behind him, Eddard let out a large sigh. Staring into the stones that made up the tower, he spoke to himself. Now only to get Tywin to accept this. Notes. Don't worry, you'll learn what Torrhen's Lake is soon enough. Winking Smiley. Chapter 44, The Battle of the River's Eye, Tywin's Eyes. Notes. The song that is playing when Tywin makes note of it, is what I called Torrhen's Lake in the previous chapter. I highly encourage listening to the song as you read the chapter when it starts. The song I based it off is on Spotify called Highland Laddie, Black Bear by Pipes and Drums of the London Scottish Regiment. Here is the link on YouTube, https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=u-mkfavg. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 300 AC. Tywin Lannister. Lord Crickehall, you will command the van. On my word, you are to charge their lines, not a moment before, do you understand me, my lord? Clearly. The angry man confirmed. Good. Brother, you will command the extreme right. Lord Bainfort, you will command the left. Lord Lydon, you will command the center. I myself shall hold the reserves and direct this battle. I want no heroics or dashes for glory, understood? The wolf pups will be waiting for such an act. I expect complete discipline. Most of the lords nodded in understanding, but from the rear of the tent, he could see Roland Crickehall's furious visage. He would have to keep an eye on him. Perhaps it was foolish to give him the van in his anger, but it came down to logic and numbers. Quite frankly, he had few competent commanders to spare, and Crickehall was among those lucky few, so to speak. In other words, if he did not hold the van, then who? As for his brother, admittedly it was odd for him to not hold the center. He was his most trusted battle commander after all. However, he had previously discussed with Kevan his plans. His position on the extreme right would allow his component to swing around and attack from the side or rear if necessary. Raising his hand, he dismissed the gathered lords. On the morrow, the two armies would meet. Brother, I will see to the final preparations. Kevan reported before exiting the tent. As Tywin sat alone, he let his mind drift. How did everything go so wrong? Less than a half a year ago, he was the most powerful man in Westeros, the king including. His daughter was the queen, his grandchildren royal princes and princess, and no one would dare to even look at him. And now? Now, madness, madness and stupidity. His one and only goal has always been the supremacy of House Lannister. By any means necessary, he would keep House Lannister as rulers of the West and lords of Casterly Rock. By the Seven, if it guaranteed their continued powerful position, he'd offer himself as a sacrifice. But the matter at hand would not go away any time soon. He had oft thought to himself if he had been truly an able parent. Had he not given his spoiled children everything they needed? Had they not the finest silks? The most succulent foods? The strongest keep calling home? Dear Joanna had always been the softening side to the twins. After Tyrion, they only had him. Perhaps he was cruel, perhaps he listened not to their wants and desires. But by all the gods, can anyone blame him? He had given them everything, and yet it was not enough for them. Jaime still had some hope to him. Let it never be said that he was not proud of his eldest son's martial prowess, but to waste it on being a glorified bodyguard was the worst thing that could have happened. After the end of Robert's rebellion, he had requested to the new Stag King that he be relieved of his oaths, to take his rightful place at Casterly Rock. But it was not Robert Baratheon that stood in his way. No, it was none other than Jaime himself who still held on to delusions of grandeur. Before the fall of the Targaryens, he knew it was Aerys II who had taken his boy. But after King's Landing, it was Jaime himself. Cersei believed herself to be the most intelligent person in the realm. He had received covert reports from Pycelle for many years, even so much as spying on his own children. He did not distrust Cersei because she was a woman, he distrusted her because she was stupid. She believed that power in and of itself was what made himself so great. What she did not realize was that it was how one used such power. After all, any man who must call himself a lord, is no lord at all. Much in the same way of a blade. A sword itself was not dangerous, it was how the person used the sword. And Tyrion. Tyrion had always been his greatest shame. He killed his dear Joanna, and for that, he would never forgive him for that. But, it had always piled on. Most especially the drinking and the whoring. But in the month or so that he had still received word from Pycelle before he was killed, he had been surprised at the reports. Tyrion had apparently done very well as master of coin. He had dialed back his use of whores, though not completely. Still, as a whole, his 3 children disappointed him to no end. My lord. Our scouts report movement from the Stark camp. A messenger barged in. After he had suitably reprimanded for not seeking entry first, he dismissed the man. And so it begins. Throughout the night, and into the early morning, his men had relaxed. He had ordered extra provisions and light guard duty to relax them and give them more incentive to fight. That was some hours ago. Now, they were almost done marching. They left their camp some time ago, and only one more hill separated them from the unofficial place of battle. Flicking his wrist, his commanders nodded and rode to their own formations. In only a few moments, his host had begun to break up into their specific groups, such as the van and the flanks. When the force had finally reached the peak of the hill, the view before them confused them. At the very bottom of the hill, roughly 700 yards away, an entire battalion of archers resided. They were stalwart and still, no movement detected. My lord, are those archers? Aye, they are. Lord Crickehall galloped up to him. My lord. Permission to run them down. Denied. This is no doubt a trap of some kind. Lord Crickehall huffed angrily and snapped his reins, turning about. He could feel his brother riding up slowly to him. What in the 7 are they doing? I know not, but it is no doubt a trap of some kind. He was silent for some moments while he thought to himself. Finally, he made his decision. Kevan, order a company of horsemen to scout the flanks. I will not sit as we are potentially cut off. My lord. He bowed from atop his charger and turned to give the orders. Lord Lydon, order the men to defensive stations. We cannot be caught unawares. At once, my lord. Staring at the horizon, Tywine muttered to himself. What are you up to, boy? The army had stopped for over an hour as Tywine awaited word from the scouts. Finally, after close to 2 hours, the company reformed and rode for the commanders. The 2 sergeants had reported nothing. For an hour to the north and southeast, there was no sign of the northern, Riverland, or Vale main force. But before they could think on the possibility, they heard yelling. My lord. The archers. They are firing. And so they were. The enemy archers had finally acted from their silence and began firing off their missiles. The first volley had fallen short. No doubt they were still figuring out the range. But the second volley hit some men, and more on the third. And now, they were hitting much of the shield line, his only infantry. My lord. Shield wall. Shield wall, you idiots. He had ordered. Already, some of the peasant sergeants had already ordered such, perhaps he should make the small folk his commanders. At least they seemed to have some sense. And so, few men fell to the arrows, but still, this position was untenable. My lord. We must run them down. Lord Crickehall had nearly yelled at him. He had almost relented. But one thing kept him from allowing it. Where was their main force? If he ordered the van to charge the archers, they'd lose their most experienced and veteran cavalry force they had. And for the first time in his entire life, he was hesitant about what to do. But before any more yelling could be heard, the choice was made for him. Kevan leaned close to him to whisper. Tywine. We must charge them. I agree, it is most definitely a trap, but a brilliant one, nonetheless. We cannot stay here while they lose volley after volley. He nodded in understanding. He knew that it was an ambush of some kind, but at this point, they had no choice in the matter. Lord Crickehall. My lord. Charge them. And the wild boar grinned for the first time since his son had died at Harrenhal. Wheeling about, he was able to hear Lord Crickehall shout to his men. Men! Form up! We'll take this fight to those cowards. And we'll shove those arrows so far up their behinds that they'll throw them up. The entire mounted vanguard force cheered for their commander. And so, slowly at first, the Lannister van galloped at full speed down the hill, intent on wiping out the battalion of archers that had already culled hundreds of them in the time since they started firing. But about 200 yards before the van would impact the archers broke and mounted horses that were posted behind them. There it is, Kevan, there's the trap. His brother nodded silently in agreement. But it seemed that in his blood rage, Lord Crickehall did not consider this. So as the archers began to gallop eastward, over their own hill, his van followed. What? What? Crickehall. It's a trap. More to himself than anyone else. No doubt the boar could not hear him from here. And so it was that as the enemy bowmen galloped past the crest of the hill, at the same time, their entire line of heavy infantry came over the crest. And Crickehall could not stop. Already, the van had been galloping uphill in an attempt to catch the retreating bowmen, but the heavy cavalry had lost a great deal of momentum going up the hill. So much so that when they finally crashed in the line of heavy northern infantry, it was like water upon rock. He could do nothing but watch as his entire van was systematically slaughtered. And that goddamned noise. As the last of his force was destroyed, the Northmen began slamming their drums and blasting air into bags. It was high-pitched and shrill. Some of them men winced and grimaced as the sound penetrated their ears and gave them headaches. Despite the shrieking sound and loud drums, admittedly there was a steady tune there. His long experience allowed him to look past it. But it did nothing to help his own men. His footmen shuffled nervously, and most of his mounted troops had to use great effort to calm down their mounts, scared from the unfamiliar, painful sound. And blessed be the Seven, the enemy didn't stop playing the goddamned sound. As he ordered Kevan to ready the rest of the troops, he finally saw him. The boys that had made his life so difficult. From this distance, he couldn't make out specifics, but the bright auburn hair was obvious. The broad-shouldered lad with a grey wolf running next to his horse was undoubtedly Robb Stark. And the other boy with a wolf, this one with darker hair like his father, must be Edwyle Stark. He couldn't hear it over the loud sounds, but he could see as the Starks rallied their men. The two boys swinging their swords as they no doubt gave grand, but ultimately useless, speeches. And after his commanders were able to steady the horse, and reinvigorate the men, the field calmed. The Battle of the Rivers had begun. And so it begins. Notes. By the end of the chapter, this is a visual of the battle formations. It is a very rough drawing, so look between the lines, so to speak. A very general idea. Chapter 45, The Battle of the Rivers 2, Robb's Eyes. Notes. Same song as noted in the chapter previous. Chapter text. 300 AC. Robb Stark. His force had marched from their camp and taken positions in the tree line just past the eastern hill. The battle would take place in rolling fields where two prominent hills stood. The woods he hid in were to the east of the eastern hill. It had taken time to ensure that all aspects of his plan were understood. It would only work if every commander knew their role and the timing of each maneuver needed to be perfect. Sir Limond Goodbrook was given command of the battalion of archers to be used as bait. Robb was impressed with skill during the siege of Harrenhal, so felt justified in his decision. Instead of a center and two flanks, Robb had decided to only organize them into two columns. The right column would be led by himself. It would be made up of much of the northern Highlanders, including the Umbers, Mormonts, Glovers, now under the command of Lord Robert Glover. Much of the Riverlander component would be with him as well. Sir Imry and Sir Stephen held joint command of the Riverlanders, joining his column. His brother Edwyle was the overall commander of the left column. His force was mostly made up of those of the eastern shoulder of the north. Carstark spearmen made up the bulk of his front lines, but the Locks, Flints, Hornwoods, Marndalis, and the remnants of the Bolton forces joined the lines as well. Much like Robb had the Riverlords, Edwyle had the Vale Lords behind him. Holding his fist into the air, he heard the many lords and commanders and sergeants call out to hold their marching. With the flick of his wrist and not a word spoken, Rob ordered the archers under Suleiman to advance over the hill and take their positions. Sitting still for a moment, he eventually looked over to his brother and nodded. They'd probably be here for a while. Getting off his horse, he noted how many of the men began to relax themselves. Some of the older peasant sergeants kept their troop on alert, no doubt having served during Greyjoy's rebellion or Robert's. For now, he calmed himself before the coming battle. "So, how are you feeling?" Edwyle asked him. It was just the two of them. Many of the other lords seemed content to allow the two brothers this time of peace. "This war needs to end, Ed. I wish to see Daisy, I want to hold Samzin, I would never want to leave Winterfell again." "Ha! Now you're starting to sound like father." "Oh, don't give me that look. You've heard him. But look at us now, much like he was if you think about it. Remember, Rob, what you are thinking, what you are wishing for, it's normal, and no man could fault you for that. Edwyle, promise me something, yeah?" "Of course, what is it?" Should I fall and return to Winterfell to be put into the crypts of our house, promise me you will look after Samzin. Do not let him grow cold and distant. Make him grow up in laughter, in happiness. The holder of Winterfell is a stressful position, you and I have had to learn early, let him have his childhood." Edwyle, a boy who had always been older than his actual age, nodded in understanding. There were no words of resistance, nor words of how Rob would never fall. Edwyle was a realist, this was war. "Of course, brother. Had you even needed me to say it? I just had to make sure." Though this was more to himself than to his brother. But he turned once more to his brother with a smirk to lighten the mood. "Only, just tell me you won't go all Bernard Stark on your nephew." Edwyle didn't respond but let out a light chuckle. "Are you jesting? Your promise is the only thing keeping me in Winterfell, I'd rather be in Moat Cailin anyway. I've been meaning to ask you, what do you wish to do with your new lordship?" "In what regard?" "Edwyle, don't insult me. You have been gifted the largest castle in the north behind Winterfell itself. Not to mention that your new domain will take up a large tract of land as well." "Ah, well, in terms of the land itself, I have had some thoughts. I hope to establish at least a small village just outside the walls. A good resting point for travelers coming and going through the neck and the marshes there. It is good land too, no doubt a number of small villages for farming could start up as well. I had wished to establish a mining village somewhere, but I think not, perhaps a quarry at best. And for larger projects. You know, this might surprise you, but at one point, I had considered a large project of creating a canal that would connect the Fever River to the Bight, but... But what? That would be an excellent plan. But deeply expensive, and most likely massively unpopular with the rest of Westeros. After all, the Reach, Dawn, and the Stormlands all critically rely on the North and the Vale to go south to go west, and the Westerlands, Iron Islands, and the North to go south to go east. Besides, a project of that size would no doubt require a royal commission. I have no doubt about that, but King Robert adores father, he would. I have no doubt that King Robert would hand out a commission and warrant for such an idea, but King Robert is an unhealthy man, and no longer a young one. Now, without any heirs born of his own seed, his official heir is Stannis Baratheon, not a bad man, but a practical and dutiful one. If he ascends the Iron Throne, he will not continue to allow us in the North to have preferential treatment. But we haven't. Rob, you believe the largely isolationist policy that father has practiced is normal. To the rest Westeros it might as well be a free ticket for us to do anything we wish to. I know we haven't, but the North must realize that we are not alone on the continent. This game of politicking, this game, in the South, it is not what one is, but how one appears to be. By the old gods, now I have even a lesser wish to remain in the South. Too bad for you, I believe too. Edwyle chuckled. What do you mean? Edwyle looked at him in confusion before a face of pity crossed himself. Rob, don't tell me that, no matter. Rob, since this conflict has started, you have single-handedly led the entire northern campaign. Stop. Do not try to deny it, you have rallied Mother's Land to you, and have charmed the Vale Lords as well. That was more your doing. Rob quietly murmured. Don't interrupt me. Edwile chastised amusingly. Whether you realize it or not, when this war is over, you will be requested by King Robert to come to court in King's Landing for at least a small portion of time. Hell, you're the damned leader of basically all royal forces north of the Gold Road. He sat silently as Ed's words finally hit him. In the stress of the past moons, it was just one thing after another. Looking back, he sees it now. After every victory, after every successful diplomatic overture, he had been establishing himself. Rob, you are undoubtedly one of, if not, the most promising heir to a Lord Paramountship, currently in the realm, at least on parchment. Do not forget yourself, brother. Oh, don't worry, I shan't let you keep all the victory, but I'm more comfortable being the follower, not the leader, to you. I can handle battles, but my skill is in cavalry, hit and runs, and quick strikes. Although vital to warfare, to most pompous lords, it is not very glorious. Piss on that. If it was up to me, you'd be getting any awards sent my way. And I'll happily take them. But remember our previous conversation, to the south, it is what one appears to be, not what they actually are. Despite my actions in this war, they are uninteresting to the bards, to the lords, to the small folk. It is people like you, like King Robert, like Sir Barristan, that all the stories will be told of. And as such, you will be the most recognized. And so, the two Wolf brothers enjoyed their own company for as long as they could. But time is not a thing that is gentle or understanding. Because after a lull in the noise, they heard faint sounds. And they realized what it was. It was the sound of an army on the move. Must be Tywine and his host. Edwile murmured under his breath. Must be. Rob confirmed. The two brothers looked at each other before Edwile stuck his arm out to shake. Rob shoved it aside and quickly hugged his brother. Watch out for yourself. He whispered in Ed's ear. See you on the other side. He countered. Greywind and Phantom both yipped and circled each other, no doubt sharing the same message between the littermates. The brothers Stark disengaged, and without another word, turned and made their way back to their respective columns. Once he reached his horse, he ordered his squire, Oliver Free, to the crest of the hill. Only go so far as you can see yourself, I do not wish for the enemy to see you. The trusty Free nodded in understanding before running up the hill, before lying flat on his stomach and crawled the rest of the way, just so he could see what was on the other side. For the next nearly hour, they sat waiting. Until finally, Oliver crawled back and started to sprint down the hill as fast as he could, but safe enough not to trip. My lord. My lord. The Lannisters have sent their van to charge the archers. No doubt Sir Limond will soon order the retreat. Good. He turned to the army. March and let them hear the sounds of northern fury. And so thousands of men marched up the hill, all the while playing the sweetest sound to him. Spears. He heard a captain call out. Shields tight, boys. Another sergeant shouted. He heard a number of minor commands for a half a minute, and then they came. Like the water over a cliff, the royal force marched over the hill. And Lannister van did not expect what they saw. Unlike the fleeing archers they expected to run down, they are instead tight, readied, formations of heavy infantry with strong shields and long spears and pikes. All of a sudden, the Lannisters encountered heavy infantry holding the high ground. From this distance, he could even see the wide eyes of shock on the eyes of the front-line riders of the enemy van. Before the first few riders could rein in their mounts, they crashed into the heavy shield wall. Due to the large weight, many mounts and their riders actually rolled over the first lines. But it was not a breach that broke the lines, instead they were quickly dispatched by the lines of infantry further back. Reform! Reform! Rob heard a strong voice call out. Training his eyes, he finally found the source. His tabard was of a raging boar on brown. He had reminded him of a man at Harrenhal. He had learned that the man he had slain was Sir Lyle Crickehall. Rob could only assume that this man was related to Sir Lyle. He was older, that much was clear. Perhaps a father, or an uncle. But despite the man's effort, his words fell on deaf ears. Too much chaos had reigned. Inside flanks break. Rob shouted, his other lords and commanders relayed the command. Soon, the inner flanks of the two columns pulled back, allowing a space for the cavalry to fall into. Once a sizable amount fell into it, the flanks reformed, and slaughtered the enemy forces. It was a gruesome, but effective strategy. At this point, the skirmish was more mopping up the last remnants of their force. The Crickehall man had been knocked off his horse. Rob didn't know if he was killed or captured, but he lost sight of the man. Once the mess was stabilized, Rob knew the time had come. He let out a sigh. He closed his eyes and prayed. He prayed for Edwile, he prayed for his father, he prayed for Daisy and Samzin. He prayed for his men and the lords that followed him. He prayed for himself. And he opened his eyes. He could see the enemy lines swaying and faltering. The enemy horse was trying to calm their mounts from the noise of the bagpipes and drums. But they were eventually able to calm themselves. But his men had been invigorated by the music. A tune meant to revitalize men. The Battle of the Rivers had begun. And so it ends. Chapter 46, The Battle of the Rivers 3, God's Eyes. Chapter text. 300 AC. Robb Stark. His plan to negate the Lannister van worked brilliantly. But it was only the beginning of the day. Although a large portion of their cavalry was neutralized, the Lannisters still held a formidable force. From their opposing hill, the Lannisters began to reform their lines. 3 lines of heavy infantry began a slow march down the hill, but they stopped just as suddenly. Then the remainder of their infantry formed tight blocks behind them. Then their archers filled in the space between the blocks. Then they saw the fall of arrows. He heard the calls for shields and other commands. Mormont, Umber. Advance 100 paces. Then set in block formation, tight shields. Aye laddie. The Great Jon responded. And so the Royalist force's right column began to advance, and at the same time, began to spread for more space. He watched as Edwile adjusted his column accordingly to give room. Pushing through the columns, he finally met up with Edwile. Ed. Send a portion of the Valyman on their horse to harass their flanks. We need to distract their bowmen. Aye Robb. He turned to give out the orders. Turning back, Robb saw as his column began to set into full line positions, as opposed to marching formations. Stark. Let's charge. Umber shouted enthusiastically. No. I will not charge on them up a hill. Hold this position, they cannot afford to leave the field with us here. My lord. The Vale are on their way. Oliver pointed. And no doubt, a contingent of about 500 riders of heavy cavalry rode past the left column, heading southward. Are they fleeing? His squire asked. Robb grinned. Nay, just watch. From their position, they couldn't see much more of the Vale horsemen, but what they did see was over a quarter of the Lannister line, Robb's left, their right, shifted. And they saw why. Only a moment later, 500 heavily armored mounted troops charged into the line of the right flank of the Lannister force. Though it allowed a distraction, it was not effective as he had hoped. He saw from his position a man with golden hair on a horse, rallying his own men and horse. The Lannisters were able to resist the charge and come out the other side. Damn! Robb turned to his own men. Step back, step back. Get to the crest of the hill, slowly now, slowly. And so ever so slowly, his column actually began to march backwards, to get back to the crest of the hill. In the confusion and noisiness of the battle, he had mistakenly sent his column too far forward, in range of the enemy bowmen. He had hoped the Vale charge would have allowed them a moment of reprieve, but it was not to be. Now, the army was back on the pinnacle of their high ground, out of range of the Lannister arrows. Robb. He turned to watch as Ed approached him. Good call, better to regroup than attempt to stay where we were. Aye, my thoughts as well. Ideas. Hold for now, they cannot turn to leave without us running them down, but their supply situation dictates that. Horns. Both brothers turned at the call out. Looking out into the field, they saw as the entire front line of the Lannisters began marching down their hill, their light infantry following close behind them. They mean to force our hand. Meet them on the field, then have them pepper us with arrows and flank us. Robb stood, willing himself to think. Come on man, damn it man, think. Then he came up with something. Ed. Mount your horse and take command of all the horse. We failed attacking their right, but look. Their left is much less strong, ride north, then swing around and hit them from the flank. I'll leave Karstark in command of the infantry. Robb nodded. Go. And his brother ran off to join the cavalry. He was always better at mounted warfare anyway. Within some minutes, he noted much of the Vale force retreated directly eastward. He knew it was Edwyle doing so because he wouldn't want the Lannisters to expect their attack. Now he had the most important job. Holding the line until Edwyle's force of about 1,000 heavy cavalry could ride through the Lannisters' left flank. Hold. He needed so because a company of about 300 Lannister heavy infantry began a slowly march against their lines. He turned to the commanders and shouted loud enough for the men to hear him. They mean to test us. Do not falter. And it was exactly what they did. The company of Lannisters approached within less than 50 yards, no doubt in an attempt to go at the north into charging, but he and his commanders were able to keep their men disciplined and in line. Once the Lannister company slowly made its way back to its line, they heard another horn sound out. This time, Robb directed his attention to where Rickard Ryswell was pointing at the right flank of the Lannisters. It seemed the Lannisters were now trying to break the line using mounted archers. A company of horse archers numbering about 200 rode across the field laterally. They focused much of their concentration on the line where two different troops came from. It was the end of the infantry of the Riverlanders and the beginning of the north in Edwyle's column. No doubt they saw the different banners and hoped to break the cohesion. But the large, thick shields of Karstark spearmen stopped much of the projectiles. Less than a dozen men actually fell. Together, you rats. He looked over and saw Harry on Karstark order the small gap to be filled from the fallen footmen. Steady, boys. Steady. Hold the line, do not falter. He and his commanders continuously bellowed encouragement. The men, mostly small folk, needed constant pressure to hold. Despite their experience, lines of Lannister heavy foot and cavalry was enough to shake most men. Robb. More horse. His good mother yelled, pointing in the same direction. And this time, he actually gulped. Riding for them was at least 2 companies of heavy cavalry. Tightly packed and aimed right for their lines. They're attempting to breach. He whispered to himself. Quickly he roused himself and began moving down the line. Hold. Ready spears. Ready spears. Shields tightly packed, boys. Lower them spears, lads. A number of captains and sergeants shouted out. This is it, men. They ride for this line. Robb gave one last burst of encouragement before turning to Lord Karstark himself. Hold them, my lord. We cannot afford a breach. If they do, their infantry will charge in before we can reform. They'll fall on Karstark's spears. Rickard Karstark turned and shouted out more commands. Returning to his previous post, Robb rounded just in time. The first 1 or 2 lines of Lannister horse were able to turn their mounts away from the spears in time, not wishing to needlessly die, but the third line could not, with their brethren to their flanks. They literally had no place to turn. And so, the rest of the Lannister cavalry clashed right into the heavy lines of the spearmen. It was bloody. But that many horse is still a tremendous amount of weight and force. And so only the second or third line were able to break into the army. Damn! Umber shouted out next to him. Sir Wendell. Robb shouted. My lord. The knight was ready. Take your men and reinforce Karstark's line. They've been breached. Lannisters. Despite not recognizing the voice, he once more put his attention before them on the field. A large chunk of the Lannisters' infantry was marching with purpose. They mean to attack now. Attack before we can reform our lines. Sir Roger. Take your men and give compliment to Sir Wendell. Lord Robb, surely. Now. He actually growled, Grey Wind growling next to him. The Lannisters seemingly a better option to him than pissing off a direwolf. The infantry in the inner lines were able to dispatch the cavalry that broke through with relative ease, but now they had a large column of Lannister infantry marching at fast speed for that section of the line. Reform. Reform. Harry on, get your men to the right section. Tor, get yours to the left. He heard Lord Karstark command. "Damn it, Ed, where are you?" Robb worriedly muttered to himself. But the Lannisters had finally made their move. They were on the move and locked into their decision. He couldn't move his column to flank because the Lannisters' left flank was still standing. His hope was Ed's attack would disrupt them long enough for his column to march and flank the attacking Lannisters to relieve Ed's column. What did Sir Roderick say? Plans are soon forgotten at first contact with the enemy. Come on, Ed, where are you? The reformed line could not hold forever. The Karstark men were skilled, aye, but not gods. They could not hold for much longer. Tywin Lannister. Damn that man. Damn him. Tywin cursed Cricker Hall. He knew he should have given the command to someone else. He was far too enraged to think clearly. And now their entire vanguard was destroyed. My lord. The infantry and the archers failed, allow me to lead a force of heavy horse to breach their lines. His brother called out. Agreed. But not you, you are too valuable. Choose a trusted captain. I. Kevan turned and snapped his reins, trotting back to his section of the line, no doubt to organize a charge of heavy cavalry. My lord, permission to advance 100 paces. Lord Lyden requested. Denied. At the moment they have nowhere to go. No need to uselessly open our lines. Then at least give me leave to reinforce the left flank, it is dangerously exposed. He pressured. Lord Lyden. The battle is before us, not on our flank. Do not ask me again. My lord. The man acquiesced. Though, the more he thought of it, the more he began to see its merits. He had yet to see the royalist cavalry. But he was convinced that they would attack from the south, as they had already tried to do once. No doubt they wished to break the strongest component of my host. It was a solid plan for the brothers Stark. If they could break Kevan's force, then there would no doubt be a downfall of cohesion. His most experienced, veteran troops were on the right flank. If the Stark horse could break them, it would be disastrous. Sir Haerin. Haerin Prester was the younger brother of Sir Forley Prester, and the cousin of Lord Garrison Prester. He served as a foot commander in his army. His elder brother, Forley, was currently a hostage of Robb Stark. My lord. The Starks mean to break our strongest block, then rout us. Take 3 of your companies and march south, to reinforce my brother's flank. Yes, my lord. The man dutifully nodded and took off to ensure his orders were followed. My lord. Called Petter Swyft, son of Sir Harris Swyft, and an immensely more capable man than his father. What? My lord, apologies for speaking of Lord Lyden's voice, but would it not be prudent to reinforce our left flank? The right seems capable enough. Gods, how many times will I be second-guessed? Sir Petter, I would advise that you... Before he could finish his sentence, a loud bellow of horns sounded through the air. And it wasn't his own. The Vale. Move, move, move it. Oh gods. And Tywin turned his gaze to where others were pointing. He had been so preoccupied with penetrating and routing the Stark's left flank, his right, that he forgot about the other flank. And without a second moment, thousands of the Vale's famous, heavy-mounted knights, rode over the small hill just to the north of his host's position. And they were headed straight for his left flank. Blast it! Sir Haerin! Sir Haerin! Move your troops north! But it was too late. Tywin had convinced himself that the Crown's forces would aim to batter and destroy his right flank, that he did not consider the left. Lord Lyden was right. And the Vale's cavalry hit the exposed left flank from the north. They tore into the far less experienced green boys than the previous charge from the south. Just as a man does not consider the insects neath his boot, the hooves of the heavy horse do not feel for the hundreds of men that they trample over. Peasants often fear charges of heavy cavalry, as right they should be, but for the wrong reasons. They think the biggest threat is the heavily armed and armored man riding his mount. In truth, 'tis the mount itself that poses the greatest danger. 1,000 stallions, over 15 hands tall, armored horse is the true enemy of footmen. So as the Vale's force completely eviscerated his left flank, they cut through the greener troops as one would with a knife through, well through butter. And, despite what he thought possible, the Vale's charge was now the least of his worries. Because though the Crown's horse created a breach in his lines, it was the entire Stark left flank that was cause of concern. Because now, thousands of Northern heavy infantry and Riverlander light foot charged. They charged because now they had the opening in the enemy's line. Saharin had already been diverted with the reinforcements south, gods had Tywine been foolish. There was only one force left to bolster and fortify the disintegrating left flank. His reserves. And by the gods he would not lose this day. One of his company leaders, was the head of House Broom, Sir Rafford. Sir Rafford. Take your company and march north. Lord Banefort's lines are dissolving, reinforce them as necessary. My lord. Sir Rafford nodded quickly and took off. And the battle continued. But the meagre forces Tywine sent to fortify his left flank on the north, was insufficient. He could not redirect his experienced right, southern flank under Kevan, as they were engaged heavily with the Stark line themselves. Sir Rafford had led his company of about 700 north. But, if they were trying to plug a leak in a boat, they were useless, as the boat had 1,000 leaks. The 700 red cloaks in reserve bolstered the beleaguered line troops, but it was not enough, and now, the entire Stark column under Robb Stark had reached the lines. My lord. We cannot hold them for much longer. Lord Melwyn Sarsfield called out. He heard many shouts from his left flank, most calling out fear and terror. Only a few were knights and sergeants trying to reform the line. Gutsy, but ultimately the effort was too small, too late. And then after, he heard a great shout of triumph, and it was not from his men. His left flank broke. It completely collapsed. The fighting had evolved into individual fights with most of his forces running. Looking down, he could see notable Northmen. The lumbering giant that was certainly Lord John Umber of Last Hearth. And a fluff of auburn hair on a handsome but dirty face. Robb Stark, he was fighting alongside his men, how quaint. Seeing he had no choice, Tywine tore his own sword from its scabbard. Raising it in the air, he rallied all the horse he had in his reserves to follow him. In a maneuver that was just as the Vale had done, he led 500 cavalry north. Riding hard, he swung wide. Riding at full charge, he aimed his column of horsemen straight for the north's exposed column, much of it not having engaged his forces yet. He took one last look much further in the distant. His brother, noticeable with his golden hair cut short, was still pounding the Crown's southern force. He hadn't broke them yet, but he was bleeding them good it appeared. Focusing once more, he slammed the visor down on his blackened steel helmet, gilded with gold. And much as the Vale had done with his own troops, he repaid them. 500 armored, Westerland's horse crashed into the footman. His force cut a bloody swath through the Stark lines. He slashed without even thinking about it. It had been a long time since he had personally fought. Not since the War of the Ninepenny Kings had he actually swung his blade in battle. It was oddly reinvigorating. But he broke out of his thoughts. His force attacked from the north, riding southward, he cut right through the north's northern column. He now found himself of the center of the actual field of battle. Turning westward, he rode for his own lines, making it safely across. Turning, he examined his work. It worked beautifully, but not enough. Unknown to him, Kevan had ridden for the center while he was leading his own charge. His attack had broken the formations of the north's column of footmen. But most of the troops were those who had not yet entered the fray. And though it allowed his left flank a moment of respite, it did not stop the onslaught. Tywine. He knew that voice. But he never called him by his birth name in front of others. Kevan had a worried look on his face. He had a cut across his right brow, and he winced whenever he leaned to his left, but otherwise he seemed healthy enough. Tywine. We cannot continue. My men cannot break their flank on our own, and our reinforcements are spent. We must leave. For only the second time in his life, he felt utterly out of control. It was an unfamiliar and terrible feeling. The first time was the aftermath of the imp's birth. Tywine. Kevan's face was one of worry. And others too were looking to him for direction. The left flank had been thoroughly broken, the only thing protecting them was the left flank of his middle column. So, it has come to this. Kevan. Take command of the center. Lord Lydon nodded to Kevan. You have the rearguard. He turned to Sir Titos Brax. Unable to do it himself. Sir Titos, sound the retreat. Without another word or glance, Tywine turned his mount westward and rode off. His only hope was that he could reach the Golden Tooth, and the Westerlands, before the Crown's forces regrouped and undoubtedly chased after them. Robb Stark. Lord Robb. Look at what we have here. The Great Jon was, with the help of his son, dragging an older man in Lannister armor to him. He held the same golden mane as all Lannisters. The man had a cut running down his brow, and he could tell just from one look, that he undoubtedly had at least a couple of broken ribs from the way he seemed in pain every time he swayed one way. Who are you? He looked down at the man in a commanding tone. I am Sir Kevan Lannister. Sir Kevan, brother to Lord Tywine Lannister, of course. Tell me, Sir Kevan, in the Riverlands, did you order any atrocities? Did you order women and girls to be raped? Did you murder innocents in cold blood? I do not order such things. Robb raised his eyebrow in curiosity. The man put emphasis on the word order, though it sounded a bit disgusted, as if he knew of the Lannisters' crimes. I am not your brother. I am Robb of House Stark. If you give me your official surrender, your men shall be treated fairly and with respect. You and all noblemen and officers shall be treated accordingly. But do not test me, Sir Kevan. The older man looked as if he was struggling to appear strong and willful. But all of a sudden, he let all of his pride fall. I surrender, and on behalf of my men, I offer their surrender as well. Good man. He turned to the Great Jon. Have his wounds treated. And the battle is over, take custody of his men, but treat them accordingly with respect. Aye, lad. Robb had a moment of solitude. He stood, bloody, grimy, exhausted, and examined the field. The battle had made surprises on both sides. Like a fist fight, each side held the upper hand at some point. He could already hear some younger sons and minor lords grumble about how they somehow lost. Fools. Robb stood gazing west. And as he watched the sun pass its apex, and begin to set westbound, he couldn't help but to let out a chuckle. Some of the men closer to him eyed him wearily. And he laughed harder and harder. His chuckles turning into great bellows of laughter. More heads turned to look at him. Even his good mother gazed upon him with confusion. But he couldn't help but to laugh. Idiots thought that a battle was won when the enemy simply loses. They thought that since Tywine ran with much of his force, he still didn't lose. But Robb knew. The days of this war were closing. And Tywine Lannister was exactly where he wanted him. On the run. Chapter 47, The Lion's War. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 300 AC. Eddard Stark. The capital received word of the Battle of the Rivers about a fortnight ago. According to the message sent by his eldest son, the battle had been less decisive than he had wished, but had ultimately succeeded in their goals. Despite Tywine Lannister and a majority of the Westerlands lords as well as many thousands of troops fleeing from the field, they could no longer offer substantial resistance in force on the offensive. Many of the houses of the West were losing resources at an exorbitant rate, much of the manpower had been bled as well. But what was truly the nail in the proverbial coffin, was the lack of foodstuffs and other necessary supplies. His son Edwyle was being praised throughout the realm for his skillful use of light and heavy cavalry, not only during the battle itself, but during the many moons he had commanded the raids against the Lannister supply trains. Similarly, his son Robb was also being praised, especially by the sycophants of King's Landing, for his martial skill and brilliant strategic thinking. He was proud of them more than they could realize. Already, he was receiving offers of marriage for his second son. Only the phrase stood in the way of that. The North had suffered a number of casualties. Eddard Karstark had died near the end of the engagement. He had suffered a wound earlier in the battle but had thought it to be minor. Unfortunately, it was far more serious than it appeared, and had fallen from blood loss. Too late for anything to be done. Sir Roger Ryswell, heir to the Rills, had died as well. The man had apparently been annoyed at his lack of glory compared to his sons. The fool had charged a block of Lannister footmen only to be cut down. Admittedly, he was able to bring 3 men with him. Perhaps the largest loss to the north came when Sir Wendell Marndaile died. The knight had led a number of charges throughout the battle. Neither of the 2 most significant charges, but many minor ones throughout the field. A bolt from a crossbowman struck his head. Fortunately it didn't penetrate the good steel and glanced off. But as he reflexed, an arrow struck him between the helmet and gorget, right in the neck. He was dead before he fell from his horse. Sir Stephen Frey, the future lord to the crossing, with much hope riding on him, survived the battle, though he was injured. He would undoubtedly have a limp for the rest of his life. His eldest, Sir Ryman, was not so lucky. A spear got him in the gut, and he bled out on the field. Sir Ryman's cousin, Sir Titus Frey, had been sliced across the chest and then stabbed in his side. The only other notable Riverlander loss was the heir to Atranta, Sir Ronald Vance, who also fell. Sir Henry Bracken, heir to Stonehenge, was injured as well as his son's Rob's squire, Oliver Frey. No significant Vale Lord had fallen, though apparently there was a scare in the battle when it appeared Sir Harold Hardime had fallen. However, the young knight had simply been knocked off his horse and later survived. Of the 10,000 Northmen, 8,000 Valleymen, and 4,000 Rivermen, for a total of 22,000 men, about 4,000 fell. Much of these deaths were attributed to the Lannister assault on the Crown's left flank by Sir Kevan Lannister. Nearly 1,000 of the deaths and injuries were given to the Karstark spearmen alone, who bravely held the line for the entire battle. Though they did not have official counts, Robb and Edwyle reported that at least 6,000 or 7,000 Lannister men died. Roland Crickehall, the Lord of Crickehall, had been killed early into the battle. A man identified as Sir Harin Prester also died. Perhaps the greatest loss of the Lannister, and a great boon for the crown, was the capture of Sir Kevan Lannister. Since news of the battle came, he had appointed Stannis Baratheon as acting hand of the king in his absence, and rode north, with 200 of his best men. With them was a wheelhouse. This was not the fanciful gilded object that the former queen had used in the royal sojourn in Winterfell, rather, a specially built wheelhouse, heavier leaf springs and more durable wheels to make the long journey faster. And instead of drapes and golden handles, the wheelhouse was heavily secured. Bars on the windows, heavy locks on the outside. This was used for the transportation of prisoners. One prisoner in regard, Sir Jaime Lannister. The civil war in the Reach was still raging. And the reports of strange happenings north of the wall were not encouraging either. The realm needed to be united. It was too fragile to be broken further. And as much as he was loath to admit it, in order to achieve this, House Lannister would ideally remain as the Lords Paramount of the Westerlands. Much like the Stormlands, the Westerlands did not have one single house that could be considered the second most powerful. Many were powerful, but none were so far ahead of the rest. The realm could ill afford another civil war erupting in a second kingdom. Eddard had, as such, written a number of stipulations that Tywin Lannister would need to agree to. He would be required to agree to all of the demands if he wished to remain alive, and for his house to continue their hegemony over the West. And Tywin Lannister would not be moved by only his younger son, nor his favored sibling. There was a chance that he would still stubbornly refuse to believe the crimes of his twins. Which was why he had brought the Kingslayer along. Only from the mouth of one of the twins themselves, would Tywin Lannister truly realize the depth of his progeny's crimes. His force was already in Riverrun, Tywin and his host fleeing to the Golden Tooth. Here, he found himself with his 2 sons. The 2 sons he had not seen in many moons, and the sons that had become some of the greatest military commanders of Westeros in just a year. And the 2 of them were not better than wolf cubs at the moment. "Father." Robb whined even though he had grown into a man. I asked did Edwyle give his word? Edwyle stood next to his brother, just like he would when Robb was being punished as a boy, and Edwyle would try and accept the punishment for him. "I did, father," he commented solemnly. "Then there is no other matter to discuss, Robb." No matter how unattractive Walder Frey as a good father having is, Edwyle gave his word that he would wed a daughter of House Frey. And though they may not value it as we do, the honor of House Stark is not something to be thrown away when it is hard to hold. Eddard felt like he was scolding them like boys, not the men they had become. He had to hide a smirk at the childness that Robb acted with despite his age. You could say that it was made under duress. Robb continued. But before he could respond, Edwyle turned to his brother. Enough, Robb. I made the deal, and it is my life. I can live with it, you most certainly can as well. Robb pouted but remained silent. Very well. Now boys, Eddard lost his famous, icy visage for a rare, short moment. How have you been? And father and sons enjoyed each other's company for an entire day. Catching up on issues each of them did not know of. They enjoyed the time that they could. Until the day had gone, the moon had arose. The large portion of the Crown's lords were gathered in a feast in the hall of Riverrun. When the Crown's force had marched west after the battle, they took the abandoned castle of Riverrun. Robb had found his uncle, Sir Ed Muir, in the dungeon of his own castle. The opinions of his good brother were binary. On one hand, Sir Ed Muir was far from a brilliant military commander. And unfortunately he did not have the entire sense to see his own shortcomings. However, Sir Ed Muir deeply, and authentically, cared for his home, and his people. He was, reportedly, among the first to advocate for armed resistance to the invading Lannisters, and had selflessly led the first, if ultimately failed, attack against Tywin. Few lords in Westeros cared as much for his people as Sir Ed Muir did. Well, now Lord Ed Muir, Eddard, as Hand of the King, had officially recognized him as the Lord of Riverrun, and Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. Initially, many lords in the Riverlands had held Sir Ed Muir in bad regard. Due to his largely absent role in the conflict, and for the foolish plans he created to defend his home. With the help of his sons and his own vassals, word was spread through the ranks about how Ed Muir Tully had bravely met the Lannisters in battle in an attempt to buy time for the rest of the kingdom to prepare. A few older and more experienced lords such as Lord Blackwood and Lord Mallister, who had come with him to the Riverlands, saw through the truth, but eventually the reputation of Ed Muir Tully was saved in his own kingdom. But enough of that. He had enough enjoyment for the day. Now it was time for business. My lords. My lords. Slowly, the feasting nobles turned their attention to him. Most were happy, though the families that had lost sons and fathers in the battle were drinking more than eating. My lords, I commend you. The realm commends you. Your valor and skill has allowed you to push Tywin Lannister back into his own kingdom. There were shouts of applause and encouragement. But, the small council has agreed, that for there to be peace, Tywin must surrender peacefully. Before he could explain the stipulations for Tywin Lannister, which were quite high, shouting started. Mostly from the Riverlanders, understandably upset as they experienced the brunt of the war. He looked to the Great Jon. For as much as the large man seemed to ingratiate himself to Robb, the Great Jon was his friend much longer. So just as he had done for Robb countless times during the campaign, Jon Umber did for Eddard Stark. Already ya cunts. Fucking shut it. Thank you Lord Umber. Make no mistake my lords, I will not simply smack them on the wrist as they received at the end of Robert's rebellion. The demands put forth by me and Lord Stannis are thorough. I challenge any lord here to raise his voice, knowing how I famously detest the man. He waited for a breath as the whole fell silent. I know better than many the hardship of losing family my lords of the Riverlands, but vengeance must be tempered with justice, and battle greed must be tempered with peace. Make absolutely no mistake, Tywin Lannister will accept all the demands of the proposed treaty, or his life is forfeit. And shall not stand in the way of your justice. Lord Stark. Before he could call on Lord Bracken, Robb interrupted. That is Lord Hand to you my lord. Jon O's Bracken looked miffed that a son spoke harshly to him. Calm yourselves. No need my son, Lord Bracken I'm sure did not mean any offense. The two men nodded and cooled off. Better to maintain peace amongst the forces and not allow Tywin to take advantage of any cracks in their armor. After all, the war wasn't technically over yet. My Lord Hand, may the nobles gathered here know of the specific demands that you and the small council have raised. Truthfully my lord, I had originally planned to, yes. However, all of us old men he chuckled to lighten the mood and many of the older lords of the Three Kingdoms chuckled as well from their experience. Know the skill of Tywin Lannister and spies. Hold on, before you shout I do not doubt the loyalty of any here, however, I do not hold the same trust of a serving girl or a stable boy who could be in any window as we speak. However, when we march on the river road, and a truce is called to meet, I shall ask many gathered here to join me, as witnesses. Will we be able to add stipulations? Shouted out Andre Charlton. I am afraid not. Tywin Lannister is a prideful man by nature. It will be difficult enough for him to agree to these terms. I fear that any more demands, and he would break before he bends. His pride must be cooled with reality, not harshness, though that is not to say that reality isn't harsh itself. He gently smiled. He could tell that many of the Riverlanders still did not seem enthusiastic over the possible treaty, but frankly, despite all his connections with the Riverlands, he did not care about it at this point. The realm, he needed peace once and for all. Enjoy the feast, my lords, you have all earned it. But be ready, for on the morrow, we march west. Lord Umber stood. To doom. Or salvation. To doom. Or salvation. Many of the other northerners shouted after him. It had been a long march. Another sennight to bring the entire crown army before the Golden Tooth. It had long been thought to be nigh on impregnable, yet he was sure that Lord Leo Lefford did not wish to test that particular theory. Reinforced with the troops that had not fought in the Battle of the Rivers, the Crown's northern army number about 25,000 men. Riding next to him was his son Robb, and on the left side, Lord Tully. His other son Edwyle had been away from the main column for much of the march, using his skill to command the outriders and scouts that were in advance of the host. Father. Robb got his attention. Have you received any reports in King's Landing about Moat Cailin? When we marched south, much of the rubble had been cleared but nothing more. Due to the war, production slowed more than had been originally planned, but progress has been made, nonetheless. Under the supervision of Lord Marndaelis' nephew, Sir Godric, the main bailey has been cleared as well. The gatehouse tower has been refitted, the large tree removed, and the entire tower reinforced. That is good. Of all the points in the castle, the southward face should be given close attention. Good Robb, you're thinking strategically. Though no other towers have been completed, Sir Godric reported that the Drunkard's Tower had to be demolished. Having leaned so far, it was simply safer to tear it down and rebuild it stronger. If I remember my lessons, Sir Godric was the heir to Sir Marlon, the commander of the garrison at White Harbour. He is. Sir Marlon can spare his sons as of the moment now. His second son, Sir Warwick, is serving as White Harbour's master-at-arms. Do you think that Ed should retain Sir Godric after Moat Cailin is completed? I think he should, But, when we return to the north, Edwyle will be a lord himself, he will need to learn how to build his household the way he sees fit. But can't you simply order him to have a specific household? I see that I have no more to teach you about leading an army, but much in lordship. Theoretically, I hold that authority, yes, as I hold authority over all in the north. Yet I will not for two separate reasons. I think it would be an injustice to Edwyle himself. Though no doubt scary for him, to organize his own castle, it is better than he learn now, when he is young, so that when he is as old and grey as my mentor, he will be a great lord. Additionally, and more politically important, it could be seen as a threat to the rest of the north. A threat, father, but they love you. They do. But do you know why? It is because they know that I respect them, and care for them. They would die for me and mine because they know I would for theirs. Now imagine when news spreads how I ordered the formation of a household that was not mine. Yes, it is my own son, but at that point, still a separate lord in his own right. How long do you think grumblings will be heard, fearful that I will interfere in other households? He saw as Robb let out a heavy sigh, looking his actual age for the first time in over a year. Looking like the innocent boy that he wished he could stay forever. How do you do it, father? Every day, since we marched, I asked myself what you would have done, how would you have judged an issue, how would you have led? I will tell you, Robb, that I held those same thoughts after Robert's rebellion. Besides your uncle Benjen, I was the last Stark left. You had just been born yourself. It will take time, I will not hide that. And you will make mistakes. By the old gods, will you make mistakes? Have no fear of that. As long as you learn from these mistakes, as long as you recognize what you did wrong, it can be moved on. Have you made mistakes? He turned forward once again, gazing at the horizon, his eyes hardening. He decided to deflect that particular question. Rob, with great authority, comes great duty, with great titles and prestige, comes great humility, and with great power, comes great responsibility. Fear not, you will not hold it on your own. You will have your wife, and God's granted, your mother still after I pass from this world. And though in future generations they will be more of a cadet house on their own, the first 2 or 3 generations of Edwyle's house will be more loyal to you than anyone else, and you will be able to rely on him as well. Your brother Ed is very intelligent, Rob. Oh, don't I know it, father, only, don't let him know I said that he will grow too large for himself. Rob chuckled. Speaking of Edwyle, seemed to summon him. Just from over the crest of a distant crag rode a party of northerners. He could tell the leader was his son Ed. He called for the column to stop their marching. He waited for his son to arrive. Father, I have an urgent report. Take a breather, Edwyle, then speak. No need, father, my outriders report that much of the Lannister army must be west of the Golden Tooth, however a force of about 4,000 are camped just outside the walls to the east. He heard a lord speak behind him. Outside, why not in the castle? Ignoring the question, he kept his eyes on his son. Any sighting of Tywin Lannister? No, father, however, the lion banners decorate the Golden Tooth along with the Leford's own banner. Which meant that Tywin Lannister must be in the Golden Tooth now. Very well. Nothing has changed. Come, we shall march together. We will camp tonight and tomorrow, we shall see an end to this war, one way or another. Notes. Just an announcement, I have completed all the chapters left in this story. All of them are done and there is nothing left for me but to post them. However, don't be sad that this story will soon come to an end. Fear not. Already I have started the first chapter of the next story in this series. I think you'll like it. Chapter 48, Pride or Ruin. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 300 AC. Tywin Lannister. He knew it. His more foolish lords argued that the Battle of the Rivers was simply a setback. But he knew that it was the beginning of the end. He was not a mad dog, he was logical. He had always believed he balanced his ambition with intelligence. Removing Princess Elia and the 2 children, it was brutal, Sir Gregor possessed that quality. He was sure that dear Joanna would never agree to it, but she wasn't here anymore. He did it because it was necessary to ensure the legitimate claims of his former goodson. 7 Hells, Viserys and Daenerys were half a world away and Robert the Fat sat paranoid for 20 years. Could the realm imagine what it would be like if 2 direct children of Rhaegar still lived? People, including that god's-forsaken Ned Stark, called him honorless. What honor is in igniting future conflicts? No doubt if Aegon and Rhaenys still lived, half a dozen civil wars would have erupted and ripped the realm apart. He swore when he was Hand of the King that peace, that stability mattered. If he was required to dirty his hands, then he would gladly take the responsibility. If the children's deaths weren't necessary, he simply would not have done it. But, before this latest spat, had Westeros not been at peace? Oh sure, there was bubbling hatred and politicking, but was there peace? Before Robert the Fat's recent spat at his twins, no armies marched through the realm. Kingdoms were not blooding each other. He would gladly take credit for preventing such conflicts. Though he was sure no one else saw it that way. Was the method of the children's death required? No, not at all. But the outcome was the same. His mind was wretched from his day thinking when he heard the pounding to his temporary quarters in the Golden Tooth. Come. Lord Lyden entered the chambers and bowed. My lord. Official counting is done. Yes, my lord. I am prepared to deliver the report. Well, don't keep me waiting, cease this drama, speak. Lewis Lyden nodded hurriedly and sat opposite to him from the desk. Taking the difference between the numbers we have, and those that we marched from Riverrun would indicate that we suffered about 7,000 casualties. However, as we do not have the field and count itself, this is more likely that many thousands have been injured or simply deserted. Do you have a count on the nobility? Lord Crickehall is an unknown. He is either a hostage or dead. When Sir Kevan was transferred to protect our rearguard, Sir Harin Prester took his companies to fill in the retreating right flank. It is presumed that Sir Harin has fallen as well. Sir Amory Lork died as well. And my brother Kevan. Lord Lydon sat silently for a moment. It is unknown, my lord. After asking the men, the last time someone saw him was when he was being pulled off a horse. Apologies, my lord, we know nothing more than that. Leave me. Lewis Lydon didn't seem to be able to leave quick enough, despite the man hurriedly exiting the chambers. Kevan, do not leave us yet, brother. Perhaps he should have given his brother more recognition. Geryon and Tijet would always argue with him with any decision. And Jenna was forced to leave Casterly Rock far too early to meaningfully give any sort of counsel. Kevan had always stayed with him. Followed his every command. He wouldn't die. He couldn't. Just then, a pounding at the door came. Gods, what is it now? What? My lord. Banners to the east. The north, Riverlands, and the Vale march on us. Damn it. He muttered to himself. He stood and strode to the door, opening it. Sir Rafford Broom stood before the entryway. Lock down the castle. Order the encamped men to full defensive formations. My lord. Sir Rafford responded, running off to complete his orders. Edwyle Stark. So that is the Golden Tooth. It was a small castle, far smaller than even he had expected. However, at just one glance, Ed could tell that it was highly formidable. Let us pray to the old gods that Tywine accepts peace. I have no wish to assault this castle. True to his scout's word, many banners flew over the castle, yet the most notable was the Golden Lion on a field of gules. Before the walls of the castle stood a line of Lannister infantry. Tired and beleaguered they appeared, yet no doubt still dangerous in their present state. Hold the host. Father ordered Robb. Without a second word, Robb nodded and began to ride past the lines, calling orders to halt and to stand fast. In only a few moments, as the word was spread, Robb soon joined him with Father, Lord Umber, Lady Mormont, a healed Lord Bolton, Robert Glover, the new Master of Deepwood Motte, and Lord Carstark. Joining him was a small contingent from the other kingdoms, Lord Tully, Lord Blackwood, and Lord Mallister from the Riverlands. From the Vale rode Sir Andor Royce, Sir Harold Hardyne, and Lord Gilwood Hunter. My lords, see to your men. Stand them ready in line formation. In the meantime, Edwyle, take a herald, 2 riders, and a banner of peace before the lines and call for a truce. I trust you'll convey the importance. Ed nodded without a word. Turning, he spoke to a few riders he had grown close with during the war. Gannon, Pace, ride with me. Bully, you'll bear the banner of peace. Hearing the many affirmatives, he turned his reins. Looking back, he saw as Bully tied a white square of cloth around the tip of his spear. Let's ride. Snapping his reins, he and the 3 men took off across the field. He could see a shift of the Lannister men in front of him. None reached to point spears or draw swords, though the grips on their shields noticeably tightened. As he reached their lines, only about 40 yards away, he called out. Is there a man here, who speaks for these soldiers? It was quiet, silent, for a time before a man pushed aside some of the soldiers and walked from their lines about 10 yards. He had black steel plate armor, embossed with 3 golden lions. Undoubtedly a noble, yet his face carried the bruises and lines of exhaustion from the previous battle. I am Antario of House Jast, Lord of Jast's Hall. Edwyle kept his manners. Good day, Lord Jast. I am Edwyle Stark, Lord of Moat Cailin and Defender of the Marches of the Neck. Well met, Lord Edwyle. Ed noticed he had few words to say. Lord Jast, I have been commanded by my father, the Hand of the King, to issue a call for a truce. Please, may I speak with Lord Tywine Lannister? Lord Jast eyed him warily. Lord Lannister is not on the front lines. I will need to send a runner to him. Shall you wait? Aye, my lord. Send a runner. I shall await an answer here. As if to emphasize his point, he slowly swung himself off his mount, and motioned for the other to do the same. Gannon and Pace took their short spears, and as the Lannister men clenched with nervousness, simply stabbed them into the ground. It took about 2 minutes, But eventually, Edwyle heard a commotion, as a mass of Lannister soldiers moved aside to allow the Great Lion of the Rock more space. Edwyle had never actually laid eyes on the man. He was tall, very tall. Even the soldiers with their metal helmets stood shorter than his helmless head. He had hair, but a receding hairline that neared the top of his head. Undoubtedly it had been a golden mane of hair at one point, yet now it was beginning to fade to a handsome silver or grey. He possessed a short-cut beard, close to his face. But it was the eyes that stood out to him. They reminded him much of his own father actually. Unquestioningly a commanding gaze. Yet Edwyle was brought up by the likes of Eddard Stark. He would not allow this lion to break him. They stood silent, neither initiating the words needed. In a surprisingly soft voice, Edwyle had expected a stronger one from the stories. Tywin Lannister began. "Well, you did not ride all the way here for nothing, cub. Come now, what is it you wish?" He did not allow the words to faze him, as doubtless most men were. "Calm yourself, Lord Lannister. This cub is here because your own cubs could not control themselves." Tywin's eyes hardened and he could tell he hit a sore spot. He hoped he had not already ruined talks. "My father, Lord Stark, requests a parley. In between the castle and the Crown's host." Once again, Tywin did not immediately respond. Then, conditions. "Both parties shall be entitled to an escort of 4 armed soldiers, no more. No lord nor knight, besides the escort, shall be entitled to bear arms of any kind." "Very well. These terms are acceptable. Return to your lines, Edwyle Stark. Inform Eddard Stark that we shall meet." Ed didn't bother correcting the obvious snub to his father's titles. He simply glanced away and nodded to his men and gestured for them to mount. Turning their horses around, they rode hard for their lines once more. By now, Sir Jaime had been taken from the secure carriage and stood next to the lords. "Edwyle." His lord father looked at him. "Do we have an agreement?" "Aye, father. Lord Lannister shall meet with you. He has agreed to the terms of the meeting." "Good, very good. You shall join Robb in accompanying me. Lord Mallister here is already aware of the terms, so he will stay behind. Lord Tully and Lord Blackwood shall join us. As shall Sir Andor Royce and Sir Harold Hardyne." "By your command, father." He could see Robb roll his eyes at the over-the-top formality with which he spoke with. "Come, men," his father called out. "Let us see how we shall end this war, with blood, or with parchment." And so the Crown's party rode to the middle of the field. Jaime Lannister on his own mount chained. This is what the last few moons have led to, this final moment in history. "Eddard Stark." "Stark." "Tywin." He calmly retorted. "Your boy said that you had a potential peace." "Aye, he was true." "Very well. If you wish to have peace, you will do the following. Robert Baratheon will effective immediately reinstate Cersei as Queen of the Seven Kingdom. He will reinstate her children as their rightful places as princes and a princess of the blood. By his warrant, he will cede Willowwood, Shira, and Pink Maiden and all of their lands to the Westerlands." Eddard stood quietly. He knew what Tywin was playing at. His own vassals were in attendance. He had to have the initial upper hand at first regardless. "You mistake me, Lord Tywin. It is you who will accept the following terms." "Enough. This started because you poisoned the mind of the king. You and Stannis and Arryn." Lord Tywin roared. "Those filthy rumors are lies and should have been treason if not for the machinations of Arryn. He had hoped it would not come to this. My lords." He spoke to his company. "Please give Lord Tywin and I some privacy. Robb, Edwyle, please stay here with Sir Jaime." Tywin's eyes widened when he saw his former golden son in chains. "I advise that you excuse your vassals, my lord." Tywin glared at him, but turned anyway and excused them too. Each party had retreated 30 paces from the meeting place. The only ones left were Lord Tywin, himself, his 2 sons, and Jaime Lannister. "You received a raven from me many moons ago, rightfully accusing your daughter and son engaging in the crime of incest. You refused to believe it, well, believe it now." He turned and took the cloth gag out of his mouth. "Hello, father." Jaime spoke in his usual sarcastic tone. Jaime. What have you gotten yourself into? You know, this wouldn't have happened if you actually listened to us. What do you? But no, you just had to ignore us, just had to focus on your own power. Stop this ridiculous. Oh, and there we go again. More of your demands. You have no. Enough. Jaime finally shouted. It shocked his father, and it certainly shocked his sons and himself. I am done being your target dummy, to use me as your shield. I should have let the Mad King take you all. And the field grew quiet. Now even he was looking at Jaime with curiosity. Even 4 moons in captivity, Sir Jaime held his flippant. Sir Jaime, what do you mean? His son Robb asked. Ah, the young wolf. And the prowling wolf. You know, cubs, if it weren't for me, you wouldn't be here, as neither would your father or mine as well. Eddard glanced at Tywine, both silently agreeing to staying quiet, allowing Sir Jaime to rant. Do you know what happened that day? When word reached the Red Keep that Rhaegar had fallen at the Trident, the Mad King shouted and yelled, demanded things and scratched. Then finally, my father. He turned a hateful gaze to Tywine. My father requested entry to the city. And all advised him not to, even I. Everyone knew of the rift between the two. And then, that grey-sunken cunt, Pycelle, was the only dissent. Open the gates, your grace. Lord Tywine is a true and good servant to the crown. Gods, I should have killed the man years before. Jaime did not cry, but his eyes were shaky and wet. And as the gates opened, the city was sacked. Do you know what the Mad King told me? He told me to bring me your father's head. Tywine widened his eyes at that. Everyone did. Then he turned to his pyromancer, burn them all. Burn them in their homes. Burn them in their beds. Burn them in their shops and streets. Tell me, young cubs, would you have done it? The Kingslayer turned his head so that he bore his eyes into his father and Eddard. If your precious father ordered you to do that, would you have kept your oaths? All was silent. Eddard, realizing the terms may need to be changed. The Kingslayer turned to him in particular. Tell me, would the great Ned Stark keep his oaths? I stabbed the pyromancer as he fled to do his bidding. Returning, Aerys asked where my father's head was. I stabbed him through the heart. He just kept shouting, burn them. Burn them. I sliced his neck wide to ensure he wouldn't rise again. He returned his gaze to his 2 sons who stood wide-eyed. Even Edwyle was stupefied. And then your fucking father entered the throne room, and without judgment, looks at me and calls me a Kingslayer. By what right? By what right? The Kingslayer began to stumble forward until he fell, Robb and Ed catching him. While catching his breath, Jaime put his attention on his father. We did it, father. Cersei and I, since we were young. She was able to delve her claws into me, and once she had done so, it was never anything else. With his chained hand, the Kingslayer grabbed his gag that Eddard had dropped to the floor and tossed it to the wind. There, father, there is your precious fucking legacy. The field was silent. The rest of their parties watched, curious at the movements, but did not know what was said. No one said anything for a long time. A very long time. But it was enough. Eddard gathered himself and turned to Tywine. Lord Tywine Lannister. Sir Jaime Lannister has confessed multiple times to the crimes and truth of incest. Joffrey Waters, Myrcella Waters, and Tommen Waters are no legitimate offspring, let alone Baratheons. Here are the terms the crown is offering. You will recognize the crimes committed by your eldest children. You will recognize that your grandchildren possess no right to the Iron Throne. The Westerlands will pay reparations to the Riverlands and the Reach for all damage done during this war. You will reduce the size of your standing host by 1/3. You will no longer be permitted to leave the Westerlands unless expressly summoned by the king, or the hand of the king, whether that be me, or another in the future. All houses of the West that engaged in the Lion's War, will hereby be required to send a hostage to King's Landing for a minimum of the next 10 years. Tywine did not move a muscle during the entire speech. Further, Cersei Lannister, at the conclusion of hostilities and final goodbyes, will be exiled from Westeros under pain of death. With many new crimes unearthed that had been previously hidden by the former queen, Joffrey Waters has been sentenced to death, his cruelty matching that of the Mad King himself. On the wishes of your youngest, Tyrion Lannister. Tywine shifted at the mention of the name of his greatest disappointment. On the wishes of your youngest, Tyrion Lannister, Myrcella and Tommen Waters shall be legitimized as Lannisters, after all true-born Lannisters in succession. They too shall remain in the Westerlands unless expressly summoned. They shall marry only within the Westerlands itself, or not marry at all. Further, Sir Jaime Lannister shall be given the choice of taking the black, or execution. It is through the good graces of Tyrion Lannister that I even grant the option. Additionally, although you may still be the Lord of Casterly Rock and Lord Paramount of the Westerlands, the title of Warden of the West shall be transferred to your brother, Sir Kevan Lannister, after he has been returned from bondage. He could tell that Tywine's entire life was being turned upside down. It appeared that he appreciated Tyrion's efforts, however. And lastly, you will formally accept Tyrion Lannister as your official heir to Casterly Rock, and the West. Upon your death and his ascension, he shall resume the traditional title of Warden of the West from your brother. Tywine did not speak for over a minute. My twins, failures. Eddard heard him mutter. Tywine looked him in the eyes. I assume these are not negotiable. You have it right. You will either accept these stipulations, or you shall forthwith forfeit your life, and thus sentence the entirety of House Lannister to forfeit its right to rule the West. Tywine turned and gazed west. Staring at his men, the Tooth, and beyond. All anyone could hear was the wind rustling the ground beneath them. The air was dusty, the golden grasses melding with the crags for miles. He said something. Eddard swore it was so soft, none but Tywine himself knew what he said. Pardon. Very well. He capitulated in a soft voice, with still a hard edge. Eddard believed what it was. Tywine did not accept defeat from the war, he still held himself in high opinion. It was his belief in his twins. That last vestige of hope was ripped from him. He was fighting a war that, in any other case, he would oppose as well. Good, that is good to hear. Stand your armies down. Recall your forces from the Reach. A host will be maintained here, just before the Tooth to ensure that in a moon's time, Robert shall ride here safely. His last word was from Bitterbridge. He shall ride to join us. Further, all your vassals will be sent to their homes, to arrange their hostages and gold payments. Lord Lefford shall open his gates to me and mine. You and Lord Lefford shall be the only Westerman lords to remain in the castle. With a nod, Eddard turned and walked back to his mount. Gods, he was already tired. Peace, just as difficult as war. Notes. So you noticed my description more for Tywine Lannister more closely resembles Charles Dance's depiction of Tywine. I am aware that books Tywine looks different, but Charles Dance just knocked that role out of the park. Wouldn't change it for anything. Chapter 49, Only with age, does wisdom follow. Chapter text. 300 AC. Tywine Lannister. So this is what it had come to. His legacy crashing down all around him. Betrayed, betrayed. If only his dear Joanna was here, none of this would have happened. He had been trying to convince himself of the fault for an uncountable number of nights. No words could describe the feeling in his heart. In many ways, he felt as if he had failed the family. If he had not been so blind when they were younger. In other ways, he was gladdened that Cersei was not here, for he would strangle her from anger. He knew the world of Westeros. It hated women. His eyes were only opened after he had married his dear Joanna. She slapped enough sense into him. No doubt most would mainly fault Cersei. But for the wrong reasons. Most would call her whore and fault her, simply because she was a woman. Doubtless, Septars and Septons would preach of her sin. He blamed her because he knew his children. Jaime was a swordsman, aye, but never the most intelligent. It was why he wanted him back, to craft him into a perfect future lord. Tywine knew that Cersei had to be the one to start this and continue it. It was in her way. He had been given the written records of her time in captivity, and all the past before then. Beneath her beautiful appearance, lay the mind of a mad woman. He almost couldn't believe she was his daughter. He let out a sigh. Sleep was near impossible to come by lately. Leaving his chambers, he walked the silent, Dark halls of the Golden Tooth. 2 Stark footmen in step behind him. Undoubtedly to ensure he did not try to escape. Wandering mindlessly, he found himself atop the walls of the tooth, facing west, facing the rock over the horizon. It was past the moon's peak, but a long time until daybreak. He had thought back, wondered when exactly it had gone all wrong. He realized it was exactly when it had gone wrong for him. The day Joanna Lannister died in the birthing bed. Cersei never had another woman she could look up to and respect. She had always sent her handmaids and servants away, daughters of other lords. Perhaps it was a cry for help. Perhaps he should have listened to that cry. But to lie with her brother. Even he could not forgive that. If Joanna were on her knees begging, he would not forgive that. He hated the Targaryen madness just as much as Robert Baratheon, just hid it better. The sound of footsteps drew him from his mind. Looking at the way he came, out of the darkness came the man he wished least to see, Eddard Stark. Lord Stark. He curtly addressed. Can't sleep. No. Me neither. Soundlessly, Lord Stark walked closer to him and turned to face the same direction as he did. Eyeing him in suspicion, Tywin eventually returned his gaze as well. He did not know how long they had stood. But it was long enough that eastward, just the most faint glow could be seen on the horizon. Finally, he could feel the Stark's gaze on him. Why couldn't you sleep? Don't try to befriend me. He snapped coldly. Lord Stark brushed aside the tone. I'm not. But I have unpleasant memories from a lifetime ago. I have found that speaking about them helps. He did not respond. First it was around the campfires of the rebellion, then, with my lady wife. About what? Painful things, unspeakable things. Tywin got the impression that Ned Stark held something to his chest so tight even his family didn't know. But the Stark gathered himself and looked at him expectantly. My children, my golden twins. What about them? Why the sudden interest? You are Tywin Lannister, the most feared man in Westeros. I hated you. I still hate you. If it wasn't for peace, I would demand your head myself for what happened to the royal children. He rolled his eyes at that, but before he could counter it, the Stark continued. But peace must reign supreme. And the world keeps on turning. I am curious. I have been trying to rationalize my daughter's madness. I hated them, Lord Stark. Who? The Targaryens. I had been friends with Aerys when we were younger, together with Steffon, but once his madness grew. He turned his body, so he was fully facing Ned Stark. I know more of the Mad King's madness than even you, Stark. Do not interrupt me. I sent my Joanna away because the king would take too many liberties with her. She never told me if he went so far as to. Well, better left unsaid. That madness, even if Robert did not rise in rebellion, I would have planned for his death soon. The sun was now golden in the sky. Still a shadow left in the west, but the castle was much more active now. High on the walls, the two lords watched as Stark's eldest boys began to spar in the yard and make japes with the other young nobles around them. How did you get your children that way? I loved them, listened to them. He let out a gust of air. Listening to children. They are the flights of fancy, nothing important. No, you are right. He looked at the Stark for a moment, almost shocked at the admission. But it is important to them. And they feel listened to. And that turns to respect. My own father listened to the wants of those around him, it almost ended our house. I swore that I would never allow us to fall so far again. He could tell that the Stark nearly commented on his current situation, but wisely refrained. I do not hold resentment for your lordship, Lord Lannister. But just as mercy and kindness must be hardened with justice and strength, so too is the opposite. Forgive me, Lord Tywin, and pardon these words, but perhaps you are exactly like your father. He nearly saw a blood rage. Never. Never compare me to that man. He felt his fists clench at his sides. The nerve of this man. Lord Stark was unfazed. You have not the same behavior, but you are the same. Simply two sides of a single gold dragon. Too much of one thing. Tywin didn't lower to respond. But another issue came to mind as he stood. And it was itching just as much as his own anger. Lord Stark. You serve as Hand of the King. My son. Tyrion. He nearly winced at the once hated name. Yes, Tyrion. Before you rid yourself of Pycelle, he sent me reports. Were they true? I don't know. What did they say? That Tyrion offered the small council innovative ideas, and stable and strong advice. That he was an able master of coin. A smirk grew on Lord Stark's face. That is true. If you'll excuse the name, I do believe that Tyrion has the best of both you, and your late lady wife. Before any more words could be shared, a great blast of sound could be heard in the distant east. As all the attention in the castle turned to face the noise, a great host of horse entered view. The crowned stag on a black field. He heard the Stark behind him sigh. All hail Robert of House Baratheon, first of his name. The Stark muttered to himself. Whether out of tiredness or sarcasm, he knew not. Robb Stark. Kingslayer, have you made your choice? Robert Baratheon hotly demanded. The king sat on the throne in the Golden Tooth. He had been handing out judgments all day. It was odd to see the king. He was very different from when he first saw him during the progress to Winterfell, oh so many moons ago. His face and torso were still heavy with fat, but not nearly so much as before. His beard, once wild and free that would put a mountain clansman to shame, was trimmed on each side. Not addressing the length, but shape of his beard. And his attitude had changed. Before, he had been quick to laugh, and quick to anger. Eyes clouded by wine and ale. Now, he seemed more thoughtful. His face grim, never so much as a smirk he had seen. His own father, who had remained in the capital, had been surprised by the transformation. Beside Robert stood two members of the Kingsguard. On one side, stood a handsome knight with brownish hair. Never smiling, but respectful and graceful, nonetheless. But far more curiously, stood on the other side of the king. A woman. Tall as Robert Baratheon. She bore not the armor of the Kingsguard, but rather a bluish metal. Her personal banner was of quartered suns and moon. Though instead of one of the moons, a single sword on a white field took the space. House Tarth, he knew as that much from his lessons. Though he was unfamiliar with much of the house besides the current lord, from his father's stories. The woman was attentive, that much he was sure of. Her eyes always gazing around the room, looking for threats. Commendable. He was sure that his Daisy would love to meet this mystery woman at some point. The light blonde hair clashed brilliantly with the blue of her armor. Just from a single glance, he could tell she knew what she was doing. The way she stood, the way she watched, the way she grasped the pommel of her sword. This was a woman who knew how to use the blade at her side. Many of the Riverlords and Valyman had also pointed, made angry remarks and other such nonsense. He chuckled to himself. He had no doubt they might have a stroke if they saw his own wife. His attention was called back by the king. Before the king, in only bindings, stood the Kingslayer. Kingslayer, your crimes have been accused, and proven. All that is left is the sentencing. He grumbled out. The cocky man smirked. Of course, your grace, allow me to bow to your immense wisdom in justice. The king did not rise to the bait, oddly enough. The king looked annoyingly at his father but spoke once more. I would have you executed for your crimes, however it seems that both my hand and my master of coin wish for you to be given a choice. Oh, and what's that? Of course Sir Jaime knew of the choice, everyone did. He was just making this harder on himself. You will choose between taking the black, or execution. Oh, such a hard choice, no doubt I will need time to think on this generosity. You will have none. You will choose now. You will choose now, or I shall choose for you. At that, it seemed the former Kingsguard lost all his bravado and hung his head. His long, disheveled hair hanging over his eyes. I'll take the black. Very well. Brian, take. Before he could finish, Sir Jaime looked up once more. But I wish for a favor. A favor. The king chuckled for the first time since his arrival. You stand guilty of treason, and you ask the same king for favor. I have lived this life, long under a title I do not deserve. If I am to go to the wall, I shall do so as Sir Jaime Lannister, not as the Kingslayer." Of course all nobles around let out gasps at this. No one but his brother, his father, and Lord Tywine heard the true confession. "You have the audacity to stand there," and King Robert stopped as his father bent low and whispered into his ear. Robert looked angrily back and whispered some more. Until finally, the king waved his father away. "So be it. From this point forth, let it be known that you are no Kingslayer, and that any who do, refer to you unjustly." Without a second word, the king stood and strode from the hall, the handsome knight following him, and the woman Kingsguard escorting Jaime from the hall. The nobles in the entire hall had their jaws opened in astonishment as they just saw Eddard Stark, the man who famously coined Sir Jaime as the Kingslayer, convince Robert I Baratheon to expel his name as such. Rob ripped his gaze from his father to the Great Lion. Tywine Lannister sat, among his bannermen, like a statue. No emotion affixed of any kind. But from his own place, Rob could discern a number of observations. Unlike so many other times that he was sure Tywine Lannister would be devoid of emotion, he would doubtlessly use it for intimidation or business, with bannermen or other lords. Yet here, it seemed much more self-reflective. As if he was not trying to put on a strong front, but rather ignore all in the room, focusing on himself. In many ways, Rob held some, very little, sympathy for the Great Lion. Less than a year ago, he had been the most powerful man in Westeros, good father to the king, father to the queen, grandfather to the royal children, and richest man west of the Narrow Sea. Over the course of many moons, he had suddenly become the noble pariah for defection from the Iron Throne. Edwyle had shared some insight with him previously. Many called him callous, prideful, arrogant, and overzealous. And yet, he had earned these things. Yes, he had been born a noble, far more advantageous than the majority of Westeros, yet his early life was relatively difficult in regard to noble life. Without doubt, it was not House Lannister that had grown powerful and feared, it was specifically Tywine Lannister. After working decades to better his house, serving as Hand of the King to perhaps one of the worst kings in recorded history, Rob couldn't necessarily blame him for the behavior that Tywine grew to be known by. Did this excuse his behavior during the sack of King's Landing, or the invasion of the Riverlands? Of course not, but at least looking through the eyes of a noble, one couldn't argue that he won the right to be arrogant, prideful, and overzealous. Now, all of a sudden, the man who had fought since he was even a decade old, had all his work pulled from under him. All in all, Rob simply could not imagine what that would feel like. No matter how terrible a man is, to lose your life's work, a terrible thing indeed. Throughout his thoughts, his eyes had migrated to his own table. After the king's judgments, servants had brought out food to serve. Not a feast would have been inappropriate considering the circumstances, but a shared meal, nonetheless. Very informal, many lords had already left. He gazed at the plate in front of him. It was simple. A breast of some kind, pheasant or grouse. Simple boiled and buttered potatoes, and a medley of root vegetables, turnips, carrots, parsnips, and onions. He was about ready to dig into his meal when he felt a nudge on his shoulder. Turning to his left, Edwyle was looking into the crowd. Rob, following his eyeline, caught what he was watching. Tywine Lannister. Tywine Lannister walking, no, stalking, through the crowd. Tywine Lannister stalking like a lion, heading directly for their table. The young, allied lords and knights tensed when they noticed the same. Osric Harkley laid a hand on a dagger. Willard Mandel made sure to reach behind him, grasping the sword he had leaned against the wall. Harlow Umber narrowed his eyes, but otherwise made no movement. Torrhen Karstark, still heartbroken over the loss of his younger brother during the battle, eyed the man with hate. But soon enough, the Great Lion stood before their table. Though he was not the center of attention in the hall, occasionally a Westerman or Valyman would look over in worry. Rising from his seat, Rob stood to look eye to eye with the Lord of Casterly Rock. Stark. Lannister. Flat tones. Those around the table looked on warily. Once more, silence reigned between the two. The sounds of light music and subtle conversations in the hall began to be drowned out in the intensity of the battle of wills between the young wolf of Winterfell and the Great Lion of the West. Tywin Lannister then broke eye contact and began to roam his eyes over the rest of Robb, examining him. Then, after only a moment more, once more affixed him with his legendary, piercing, gaze. He spoke incredibly slowly. "I do believe that your father cannot even begin to comprehend how fortunate he is to possess sons such as he does." Before he could even respond, Robb blinked and already, the Lord of Casterly Rock was striding away, out of the hole to who knows where. He let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. He sat down with a great sound of relief. What in the hells was that? Conversation soon erupted around the table as the young lords all tried to figure out the exchange. Edwyle leaned over to him. "I do believe that is the closest thing to a compliment one could receive from Tywin Lannister." Robb countered without turning from his meal. "Most bloody terrifying compliment I've ever received." Chapter 50, A Promise Kept. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 300 AC. Eddard Stark. Over the course of roughly a year, it was expected that over 20,000 soldiers died across Westeros, including both the northern and southern campaigns of the Lion's War. The two largest food-producing kingdoms in Westeros were ravaged by war, just on the onset of autumn. Thankfully, even here in Westeros, there was time for crops to be reaped, so perhaps there was no need for panic buying yet. After that fateful night at the Golden Tooth, the conflict was largely over. Most fighting in the Reach died down as well, however the hosts of House Florent still stood strong against legitimate rule. Eddard himself had returned to the capital to actually begin ruling a peaceful realm. Joining him was his eldest, Robb, who had been personally invited to the Red Keep by the king himself. So too had been the king's only recognized bastard, Edric Storm. The king had half a mind to legitimize the boy and declare him his official heir, yet Eddard and Jon Arryn were able to talk him away from this decision. Neither held the traditional hate of bastardry that was common in Westeros, but to legitimize Edric would simply throw the realm back into chaos. No Lord of the South would bow to a bastard, legitimized or not. After the king had agreed with them uncharacteristically quickly, he had relented and issued a realm-wide decree. In it, he had officially declared his younger brother, his heir, and created him Crown Prince Stannis Baratheon. Despite common law already recognizing him as the heir, Eddard argued it was necessary to have his endorsement. Due to the need for more Baratheons, a marriage pact was formed with the assistance of Jon Arryn. Stannis Baratheon was set to remarry, this time, to a woman of the Vale. Lady Myranda Royce. Not the most politically advantageous, yet she was thought by Maestas and the Vale to be of perfect suitability to sire children. And that was the largest priority. Robb had spent over a moon in the capital, begrudgingly, until finally, one night, he practically begged for his father to convince the king to give him leave to return north. Eddard had relented and spoken to the king. He had received word from Robb on his return that he had released Lord Harlys Hornwood from his responsibility as Marshal of the North. For the first time, Robb was effectively leading the North until his return. He had still remained in the capital as the hand of the king. Tyrion had remained as the Master of Coin and Crown Prince Stannis remained as the Master of Laws. Lord Varys also was kept on the council. Only two changes were made. Lord Jason Mallister had resigned with good intentions to return to his homeland and assist in the rebuilding and restoration of the Riverlands. His replacement was Prince Stannis' original nominee, Davos Seaworth. During the previous absence, he had been Sir Davos Seaworth. Yet after the Lion's War, Robert had awarded him an official, landed lordship, at the insistence of Stannis. Now, Lord Davos Seaworth of Cape Wrath served as the Master of Ships. Gorman, formerly of House Tyrell, was elected by the conclave to be the new Grand Maester. 303 AC. Much of his time after the war was spent rebuilding the realm. A difficult and arduous task undoubtedly. This mostly came from the concluding civil war in the Reach. Despite the Lannisters no longer providing gold and troops, some of the rebellious houses continued to battle against the Legitimists and the Crown's forces. It continued until late 301 AC, when, at the Battle of Dunstonbury, a combined host led by Lord Randall Tully, and a host of House Tyrell commanded by Sir Gullin, crushed the last force of the rebels. All three of the ringleaders of the rebellion, primarily being Lord Gerald Stackhouse, Lord Reynard Dunn, and Lord Alistair Florent were captured. It had been the original wish of him to slap the lords with so many reparation payments and demands, that they would be forced to live as the small folk for the rest of their lives. However, Prince Stannis, the Master of Laws, insisted that they be executed. Lady Oakurt also wished for the death of Lord Stackhouse, the man originally responsible for her second son's death. Axel Florent had died during the war. Alistair was attainted and executed. His only son, Alekhine Florent, was declared the new Lord of Brightwater Keep. This came with a number of provisos, however. Most importantly being, that although Alekhine was the Lord, all powers were truly vested in Lord Randil Tarly, godson of the late Alistair. He was officially vested as the royal steward of Brightwater Keep. Eddard oversaw the rest of the peace. He, at the urging of the Master of Laws, ordered an investigation into House Tyrell as well. After all, at the beginning of the Civil War, the king had sent a raven to them, demanding their host. They had denied. And yet, they eventually joined them. Eddard saw it as nothing more than another scared House of the South playing at the games, trying to leave all possible options open. Regardless, Sir Gawain Mertins, third son of Lady Mertins and heir to Mistwood, was appointed as a Knight Inquisitor, charged with the investigation. After an intensive, 3-moon-long search, Sir Gawain reported to the small council that to his belief, it had been Eddard's original thoughts. Olenna Tyrell, the true mastermind behind the house, had wished to keep all possible openings to the game. Sir Gawain was dismissed. But as capable as he was, he simply could not take it any longer. He had resigned his position as Hand of the King. For the first time in nearly 3 years, Robert had flown into a rage. After his rambling, Eddard realized it was fear. The king feared the possible implications, that he would once again be devoid of close kinship and true friends. But after a closed meeting, the king had publicly acquiesced. Eddard was still in the capital when the new hand had been announced. Robert had appointed his heir, Prince Stannis, as the new Hand of the King. Eddard had smiled at that. Till the day he died, Eddard knew that Robert could not love Stannis as a brother, but the words of Eddard and Jon had been able to convince how capable the stern man was. With his absence of his previous post, Lord Commander Selmy made a recommendation, and Stannis relented. News spread that Lord Randil Tarly had been offered the position of Master of Laws. Before he left the capital, his daughter, Sansa, had travelled with her now husband. Having been married the previous year, Eddard had travelled to Starfall while still Hand of the King to serve in the ceremony. Now, when she arrived, she brought news that she had fallen pregnant. Eddard was sad that not more of the family had been there to share in the good news. But he had seen a change in her demeanour. She was still the fair lady she had always been, but she had matured. No doubt she needed fire to establish herself in Starfall many years ago. But finally, it was time to return home. For a long time, he travelled north with his entire host. All 400 men had not seen their own homes in over a year. Along the King's Road, his party stopped at the crossroads. He was waiting for an important travel partner, his wife. Jon Arryn had left the capital himself some time ago. Finally being strong enough to travel. Word was that he was exhausted by the time he had arrived at the Eyrie. Eddard grew sorrowful. It seemed that despite his clear mind and mental attitude, time was catching up to the elderly Lord of the Vale. Regardless, there was no longer the need for a regency. When his wife finally met with his party, she shared news. Robin Arryn had grown out of his spoilt attitude through the efforts of herself and Lord Royce. He had grown intelligent, yet still occasionally willful. However, it seemed that he would remain forever hopeless in martial affairs. It appeared the boy simply couldn't comprehend his lessons, no matter how much it was beaten into him. Eddard could only hope that his reported intelligence was enough to counter this disadvantage. Edwyle had led the Northern Army north when the war had ended originally, and had been since then, taking his place as the Lord of Moat Cailin and defender of the Marches of the Neck. And their party had just arrived. Eddard climbed down from his horse and helped his wife do the same. Waiting for them in the courtyard of the moat, was his second son. The two looked at each other quietly. Before Catelyn could break the silence, scolding them for not speaking, Edwyle smirked. "Lord Stark! Lord Stark!" And the two happily embraced. Soon came his wife to do the same. "My boy, it has been simply too long. "I mother, 1,000 apologies." The parents disengaged from their embraces and stood before their son. Edwile then grinned like the child he never was. "My lord, lady, perhaps you would enjoy a quick tour of the castle." "Of course my son, of course my lord." Edwile smiled. No doubt proud of all he had done. Not as Edwile Stark, second son of Eddard Stark, but as Edwile Stark, Lord of Moat Cailin, and head of House Stark of Moat Cailin. Ed guided them around the inner perimeter of the castle. It was not a detailed tour due to it being a large castle, but it was informative. According to Edwile, the southernmost tower had been completely rebuilt. The northernmost tower was just nearly complete, yet still a number of moons until final completion. Another 2 towers had finished their foundations and begun construction on their lower levels. Edwile had elected to ask Sir Godric to remain on his household. The Knight of White Harbour had accepted with grace. Sir Godric had been appointed Castellan of Moat Cailin. Though nominally a military title, in peacetime, it was charged more with the physical upkeep of the castle. In this case, the literal construction of it. In an attempt to keep up relations with his southern neighbors, he contacted those of the Cranogmen. He accepted Gable Fen to serve as the steward of Moat Cailin. Having become good friends with the man during the Lion's War, Edwile appointed Doran Flint, brother to Lord Flint, as the Master-at-Arms of Moat Cailin. Although there were no official titles for them to be had, Edwile had accepted the services of Willard Mandel and Will Harkley through the bonds made through war. Lastly, a Maester by the name of Genton was sent to serve as the Maester of Moat Cailin. Born in the Eastern Stormlands, he had forged 11 rings to his chain. However, his best skills according to himself were medicine and finance. Finally, Edwile escorted them once more to the southern tower, the site of the current, temporary Great Hall and bedrooms. Entering the hall, they were greeted by a very pleasant surprise. Instead of awaiting their arrival in Winterfell, it seemed like the rest of House Stark wished to travel south to meet him and Catelyn. Robb was the first to embrace him, then Arya, who leapt on him and began to cry, followed by Brandon and Rickon. "Father! Mother!" They all cried. For the first time in over 4 years, the younger Starks were able to see their parents. Rickon most especially was wild with emotion. Brandon, however, he had seemed well. Ever since his fall from the tower in Winterfell, they were told of his condition for the rest of his life. He had received the occasional report from Daisy during the war, and Robb after, of the progress that Bran had made. But to see it in person was still amazing. His third son still walked with a limp. As Maester Lewin originally stated, he would live with one for the rest of his life. But he was able to walk without the use of a cane. His son worked hard with his body for years, through pain and exhaustion, to be able to walk again. Arya herself was growing into a beautiful young woman. More definition to her face filled out the previous baby fat that still resided there. Good thing too, as he had received the occasional report that Arya had grown close to Darin Hornwood, the son of Lord Hornwood. He would have to keep his eye out on that. Samzin had remained in Winterfell as the official Stark in Winterfell, however, due to his age. Daisy also remained in the castle to await his arrival to serve as the unofficial regent of Winterfell until the rest of the Starks returned. Of course, there had been another reason for Daisy's lack of visit. She was with child once more. Still some moons away from birth according to Lewin, but still too far to comfortably travel those great distances of the north. He understood, he did not hold it against her. "Father, Mother, I would like you two to meet someone." Edwile was able to break the rest of his siblings off of their parents with the help of Robb, who knew what he wished to show. Edwile escorted them through some halls and rooms until finally, he reached a small gallery. He knocked on the door and entered. Sitting inside was a girl of around 15 years, if Eddard was to guess. She had pale skin and was short. Her chestnut hair was thick and wavy, undoubtedly soft, he was sure. She offered a genuine grin to Edwile when she saw him, but immediately clammed up at the sight of him and Catelyn. "Mother, Father, I would like you to meet Roslyn Frey, my betrothed." As Catelyn stood in shock, she knew of the deal made, but hadn't expected this. Eddard made to speak, to reach his hand out. But Roslyn actually pulled slightly back a tad. He remembered, to those of the south, he still held a fearsome reputation. "No need, love, come, meet my parents." Edwile spoke softly. Just then, the privacy was broken by Rob, who came thundering into the room. "By the old gods, when will you make me an uncle?" Echoing the words that Edwyle had spoken the night of his own marriage to Daisy. But Edwyle, upset over the interruption, the meeting he had hoped to go well for some time, began to run after Rob, who weaved throughout the tables in the gallery. Caitlin, himself, and Roslyn watched on as the two brothers ran, yipped, and played. Smiles breaking their faces. And a smile graced his own face. Realizing that he had finally succeeded. When the snow falls and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies but the pack survives. The end.